Yay, we're live. We're live. Let me let everyone know. And then I gotta sign into the chat. Oh, do you already have people here? Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. We are young. Heartache to heartache we stand. No promises, no demands. Love is a battlefield. We are strong. No one can tell us we're wrong. Searching our hearts for so long. Okay. Details below. Below. Hi, Shaima. Of course, we'll get to you in just a second. I was going to talk really quick, though, about the difference between sidereal and the tropical zodiac, because I had some requests to talk about that. Let me just let everyone know I'm live. Okay. We are young. Heartache to heartache we stand. No promises, no demands. Love is a battlefield. We are strong. No one can tell us we're wrong. Shaima, do you have a time constraint? Because I really want to talk about the sidereal thing first. But if you have a time constraint, I'll look at your shit. Hello, Bexy. Hello, Bexy. I just saw you and I already miss you, sweetheart. You see, I'm cleaning all my sheets and everything. So I started laundry before I jumped in on here. Yes, Pat Benatar. Love is a battlefield. We are strong. No one can tell us we're wrong. Searching our hearts for so long. Both of us knowing. Both of us knowing. Both of us knowing. Okay, let me open up the chat here so I can see all this wonderful stuff. Yay! I have the chat open. Just another quantum function. So since quantum function is here and quantum function's a member, just so you know, I'm working on doing lessons for members only. And through live streams on here. I just have to figure out how to share my screen. But really quick, before we get into it, I just want to say a little bit about the difference between the tropical and the sidereal zodiacs. Because I'm very passionate about this subject. And I really only use the tropical zodiac. And I'm going to explain why. So originally, the zodiac as we know it, as a mathematically ideal circle of 360 degrees, divided up into 12 each equal sections of 30 degrees we call signs, that came or emerged around 420 to 450 BCE, you see, in the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Yes? Now, the constellations that preceded the zodiac, or that are correlated with the zodiacal signs, go back even further. But what we call the zodiac didn't emerge until around 420 BCE. And we know this because there are no records of it before then. And we know that this came out of ancient Mesopotamia because we have the descriptions in what are called astrometric diaries, going back to around 600 BCE. I'm sorry, I have hair on my lip. It's either my own hair or cat hair. It's just ubiquitous. It's everywhere. You know what I mean? Even my cat hair has cat hair. But this is very important because we need to know where things come from. And the reason why I'm so adamant about this today is because yesterday I found some articles that claims that the sidereal zodiac was 10,000 years old or went back 10,000 years. There's no evidence that the constellations go back 10,000 years. Now, we do have evidence that ancient humans were tracking the movements of the moon and the lunar phases as far back as 30,000 years ago, because we have evidence. Like, there's these deer antlers that have lunar depictions etched into them, you see. And it's believed that they were tracking for menstrual purposes, you know. So it could have had something to do with fertility. So we do know that ancient humans were tracking celestial movements as far back as that. Why did I go out of focus? Focus, you motherfucker. Why am I blurry? It's like a Bigfoot video, you know? A close encounter of the blurred kind. Anyway, so originally, the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac were the same thing. Because, you see, the solstices and equinoxes aligned with the cardinal signs and the cardinal points. The cardinal points, right, are the solstices and equinoxes. So the east is like Aries, you know, and the birth, sort of, you see. And then the south, you know, which we also refer to as like the highest point in the sky, the brightest point, the zenith of the year, you know, the summer solstice when the days are the longest, right? That was Cancer. Excuse me. And then Libra, of course, was the other equinox, the autumnal equinox. And Capricorn was assigned to the winter solstice, yes. The Babylonians, the ancient Mesopotamians, had a solar lunar calendar. And so early on, with the emergence of the zodiac, signs were assigned to months. You see, this was the tropical year because it followed the solstices and equinoxes. Yes, the seasons, as opposed to the sidereal year, which tracked the movement of the stars themselves. And there's very little difference between the two. Now, what makes the sidereal zodiac different? They're both mathematically ideal circles of 360 degrees, divided up into 12 equal sections of 30 degrees that we call signs. Yes? The big difference is that the sidereal zodiac attempts to account for what's called the precession of the equinoxes, or axial precession. Now, what is that? Well, it was discovered by Hipparchus, the famous great Greek astronomer and astrologer, around 127 BCE, you see? And basically, he noticed it because he was comparing his own astronomical data, that is, the positions of the stars and planets, right, relative to ancient Mesopotamian records from over 100 years prior. Yes. And he noticed that there was a very slight shift with the fixed stars and the zodiac, you see. So this is called axial precession. You see, because the Earth, let's say this is the Earth and this is the North Pole, right, is tilted on its axis. It's not a perfect sphere. And you see, over the period of 26,000 years, this axis moves and creates, right, it draws a circle in the sky, right? That's axial precession. So right now, you see the North Pole is pointed at Polaris, and that's the North Star, you see? That's Polaris. But during the time of the ancient Egyptians, when the pyramids were being built, which I think was like around 2500 BCE, don't quote me, but that's pretty close, it would have been Thuban that was the pole star, you see? And in the future, I believe it will be Vega, you see? So the precession of the equinoxes is a very important astronomical phenomenon. However, the way it's calculated, especially in Vedic astrology, because the sidereal zodiac became very prominent and a staple in the practice of the Vedic astrological traditions. Now, it's really important to note. It's really important to note some history here about Vedic astrology. The oldest Sanskrit text we have on Vedic astrology, that is horoscopic astrology, is called the Yavanayataka. And its name literally means nativity according to the Greeks, right? And it dates back to around the 2nd century CE, right? Or AD, for those of you who aren't familiar with the new scientific nomenclature. So you see, in the scheme of things, that's not very old, since the zodiac itself came out of ancient Mesopotamia at 420 BCE or thereabouts, right? So now there's a document or a text in Sanskrit called the Jyotisha, or sorry, the Vedanga Jyotisha. I don't know if I'm saying that correct. I'm an autodidact. The Vedanga Jyotisha, something like that. But it's an astronomical text, along with religious symbolism that it ties to it. But there's nothing akin to horoscopic astrology in it, right? That came out of ancient Mesopotamia. And we know this from records, right? Even the ancient Greek astronomer Eudoxus, around 400 BCE, give or take, right? Just after the invention of the zodiac, he famously said that the Chaldeans, ancient Mesopotamians, Babylonians, whatever, it was a very mixed sort of society of lots of different city-states in ancient Mesopotamia. But at the time, it was dominated by the Babylonians, or the Neo-Babylonian Empire, you see. And Eudoxus said they had an amazing skill and talent for using the stars, right, astronomical movements, in order to discern or divine someone's future events or the contents of their character. Yes. It was already sort of renowned at that time, you see. Now, ancient Egypt also factored in heavily to this. And why is this really important? Why would Vedic astrologers have a text called Yavanayataka, which meant nativity according to the Greeks, when we know that astrology first came out of ancient Mesopotamia? The reason is someone named Alexander of Macedon, who you may know more as Alexander the Great, right? Now, he was Macedonian, right, from the area around Greece, and he conquered a huge swath of land, stretching from the Mediterranean in the west, right, all the way down in the south to ancient Egypt, and then in the east, all the way to India, or at least parts of India, or what we now know as India. And so what happened there? It's something we call syncretism, which is religious and cultural exchange between different societies, right? So we had, the Greek culture mixing with the Egyptian culture and even with the Indian culture, you see. This was a very fertile melting pot. And we call this the Hellenistic Age, right? It goes from 423 BCE, the conquest of Alexander the Great, to about 300 to 400 CE or AD, after the rise of Christianity, you see, or Christianity becoming the dominant ideology, right? And Christianity sort of represented what word should I use? Christianity represented an antidote, if you will, to the ancient ideas of fate that astrology promoted, right? The idea was that you had this fate that was indicated by your birth chart, and there was only so much you could do to change it, essentially. And that was called remediation, or we call it that now. And in ancient times, it entailed going and praying at the shrines of gods and goddesses in order to appeal to them to sort of finagle your fate in a bit more advantageous direction, you see? But back to India, yes? Because horoscopic astrology didn't appear in the Vedic culture until later, until the 1st or 2nd century. And a lot of it had to do with syncretism, you see, which is what we call, as I said earlier, the religious and cultural exchange. So an example of syncretism is the mixture of the ancient Greek and ancient Egyptian cultures. Yes? So the Greek god Hermes, who was the god of, writing, communication, yes, knowledge, and all those sorts of things, became conflated with the Egyptian god Thoth, who was the god of the occult, also writing and script and, all these sorts of things. So, and that gave rise to what? The mythical character that we now call Hermes Trismegistus. And there were lots of ancient astrological texts that were attributed to him. Yes? But there's no proof he actually existed. In fact, the proof says that he was actually a product of syncretism. Yes? And the conflation of different cultures. Now it gave rise to a whole new sort of a mixture of ideologies that really underpinned astrology, right? For example, Platonism in Plato. You see, I believe Plato goes back to around 400 BCE, or maybe 3. I now, please don't quote me on that. I don't want to say incorrect information. I know Pythagoras goes back to 500 BCE, right? As does the Buddha, right? And actually, Buddhism came to ancient Greece from India, you see? That's the syncretism once again. Now, it was also during Hellenistic times, right? So after 400 BCE. But you see, Buddhism was very much aligned with many aspects of Platonism. It's very, very interesting. But what does all this have to do with the sidereal zodiac? Well, it looks like following Hipparchus discovering precession, somehow that idea of tracking the sidereal movements came to India. And you see, Western astrology has gone through so many metamorphoses. It's sort of developed and changed a lot. Whereas Vedic astrology remained pretty well intact for many, many years, hundreds of years, centuries, because it was tied to the religious practices in the Indian traditions, in the Indian culture. However, you may be aware of a little movement that I rail on about quite a bit, known as Theosophy, you see. That was started by Madame Blavatsky in the late 1800s, following the spiritualist movement, right, which we know was sort of a fraud and a scam in retrospect. And I maintain that Theosophy was pretty much a scam too. And that Madame Blavatsky, its founder, was a girl boss, a girl boss that got really adept at, swindling people. Now, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Theosophy, the Theosophical movement, became a big deal. It became a strong force. Yes, it sought to bridge the teachings of the East and the West, sort of like a resurgence of syncretism. However, this was a lot more insidious to me because it happened under the under the guise, you see, of colonialism. Hi, cat. Of colonialism, you see. So it was sort of like Western culture was appropriating all these Eastern cultures and really only at a cursory look and not even representing them in their proper context and misrepresenting their doctrines and their ideas. Stephanie, hello. How are you, sweetheart? I'm going to be done talking about this in just a moment. This is just an important thing I wanted to do for the sake of people who want to know why I'm so passionately against the sidereal zodiac. You see. So anyway, it looks like the sidereal zodiac in practical use came to India from the West, as did horoscopic astrology in general. At least that's what the evidence suggests. The textual evidence. Yes? Shh. Quiet cat. Quiet cat. I sort of lost my place in my train of thought. Going back to, I was talking about India. I was talking about Greece. I can't remember where I was. Someone reminds me. Happy Mercury retrograde. Happy Mercury retrograde. What does all this have to do with the sidereal zodiac and my cat? So anyway, the religious tradition of India kept those things really well intact. But as I was saying before, theosophy intervened because it sought to bridge the teachings of the East and the West. And of course, under the guise of colonialism, right? The British had colonized India. India was a colony of England, you see, at the time. And the Theosophical Society and Theosophy in general, including Madame Blavatsky, sort of fetishized. They fetishized each Eastern cultures, like Hinduism and the Indian tradition, which is very rich and varied. It's not a monolith, as well as Buddhism. Yes, they were very much into the Eastern philosophies. And once again, they sort of misrepresented the history, which we now know a lot better, but wasn't quite known in Victorian times. So really what she did is she sort of packaged together a misunderstanding of Western philosophies like Platonism, along with her misunderstanding or misrepresentation of both Buddhism and Indian philosophy, you see? And she sort of made up a lot of history and brought in a lot of Victorian race science. So you see, theosophy was a big influence on high-level Nazis like Heinrich Himmler, which is, again, pretty wacky. I'm not a big fan of a lot of theosophy because it goes against the historical record and it's very racist, you know? But anyway, what happened following the Theosophical movement or the founding of the Theosophical Society is that the headquarters were put in India, right? To sort of, to complete that sort of fetishization, to make it, at least, this is my opinion, to make it a bit more Eastern and a bit more mysterious or whatever. But the granddaddy of modern astrology, Alan Leo, was also a theosophist. Yes. In fact, he was a high-level theosophist who brought modern astrology to India, including, right, the outer planets and what we now call the 12-letter alphabet. The misunderstanding that the house meanings, the meaning of the astrological houses, come from the signs, which it doesn't. That's not true. They are places in the sky, right? But that's a whole nother discussion for another time. Suffice it to say that Westerners who fetishized Eastern cultures came back after they appropriated them to mess up those cultures, right? And it was very palatable to India. Yes. Even Gandhi credits theosophy, right? And its head at his time, who was Annie Besant, who was also English. He credited her with being the force behind Indian independence and the person who first got him to read the Bhagavad Gita and to reconnect with his Indian past, right? And we know that, he was one of the instrumental characters in Indian independence. Yes. And a lot of that came from Indian nationalism and an appeal to Hindu nationalism, which theosophy and Western astrology also seem to feed into. This idea of Indian supremacy or whatever, which we now see, in politicians in India like Narendra Modi, who, espouse these ideas that all of humanity came out of India, right? Which isn't historically accurate and doesn't fit the biological record. And you might be asking yourself, what does this all have to do with the sidereal zodiac? Once again, Saturn girl. It's because Indian astrology had been heavily influenced by the West, not only in Hellenistic times, but also in the 19th century and the 20th century, you see? So, a lot of these practices got ingrained into it and carried over. I'm not sure when the sidereal zodiac became the staple in Indian society or Indian astrological culture, but it had to have been after 127 BCE, when precession was discovered by Hipparchus. Now, what's very interesting, so once again, we can see historically that these claims about sidereal astrology being older than tropical, let alone 10,000 years old, are completely false. In fact, as we just talked about, the sidereal and tropical zodiacs were the same thing because no one had accounted for precession. However, according to one of my favorite archaeologists, Dr. David Miano, who teaches at my former employer, University of California, San Diego, he points out that the cardinal signs during the Sumerian period, around 3000 BCE or 3200 BCE, those cardinal signs would have been the fixed signs. So Aquarius, right? Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. Those would have been the cardinal points. But again, that was long before the zodiac emerged. The oldest references we have to the constellations which correlate with the zodiac, right? Because the zodiac itself isn't defined by the constellations, it's defined by the solstices and equinoxes. And we'll get to that in just a minute, of course. But we know historically that they were the same thing, and that the difference came out of trying to account for precession, which even in Indian astrology, there's competing ways to do it. There's calculations that we call Ayanam says. I think I'm saying that correctly. Ayanam says. And these are calculation methods to sort of determine where we are in the zodiac compared to the fixed stars, right? The idea in sidereal astrology is that it lets the zodiac drift relative to the fixed stars and the solstices and equinoxes, right? And we talked about what axial precession is, yes? We talked about where the Earth's axis, right? What am I doing it? Where the Earth's axis precesses and draws that little circle in the sky, right? And what that means is that over time, a different astrological sign occurs during the spring equinox. So hence the precession of the equinoxes. And it goes in reverse, right? It goes clockwise as opposed to counterclockwise, right? So presumably we were in the age of Aries at a certain point, in the BC time, BCE. And then supposedly the equinox entered Pisces, around, the beginning of the Common Era, And that's where the idea of astrological ages come from. I used to be all into that shit. The Aquarian Age and all that was popularized by Madame Blavatsky and the New Age movement. But I don't really get into that stuff anymore. It's not really important. And the reason is, the primary reason why I don't use the sidereal zodiac, which is because it lets the zodiac drift relative to the solstices and equinoxes. So by the time we get to, the year 18,000 or 8,000, by the time we get to the year 8,000, you'd have Geminis being born in winter time, We'd be, just get me for now. I will get to you. What sign is my cat? I don't fucking know. They're named Castor and Pollux after the brothers of Gemini. An ex-girlfriend named them. But she named them after the movie Face Off, you see. So the primary reason why I don't like the sidereal zodiac is because it lets the constellations, or sorry, the signs drift relative to the cardinal points, the solstices and equinoxes. Why do I think that's stupid? Because we fixed the cardinal signs to the cardinal points back when the zodiac emerged. Back when it first came out. You see? And the symbolism of the zodiacal signs primarily comes from two places. Number one, the planets that rule them. And number two, their place in the solar cycle, right? The alternation between light and dark over the course of a solar year. That alternation, that cycle, yes? The seemingly unchanging cycle of the solstices and equinoxes are what define the zodiac. Because the zodiac isn't a real thing. It's not the constellations themselves. It has nothing to do with the astronomical width or whatever size of the constellations. Right? It's a mathematically ideal circle. Yes? And so the zodiac itself is conceptual. We use it and we find meaning in it because how we've developed it over thousands of years, right? At least 14 to 1500 years, yeah. And the history of astrology goes back even further, right? To at least 1000 BCE, when we first find evidence of these constellations that are correlated with the zodiac. Right, from ancient Mesopotamian documents, like the oldest star catalog in the world, which is known as Mul Apin. And it contains astronomical data going back to 1000 BCE, but we have all 12 of the zodiacal constellations enumerated in there with their current symbolism. That's amazing. That's a long fucking time ago. Even though people want to claim that it's even older. Like, why? You know, this is fucking wild enough. This is cool enough. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, the solar cycle helps define the zodiac. For example, Libra. Part of the meaning of Libra is the fact that it's at the autumnal or fall equinox, right? Equal night and equal day. Right? This is the choice between light and dark, right? Where we make free choice, the decision of Libra, yes? The decision of Libra to descend into the underworld, where the nights become longer than the days, you see? In Scorpio, you see? In Scorpio. And I'll be done speaking in just a second, okay? And then I'll get to your fucking charts. But people wanted to know about this. And I hope it's interesting to you, because this is fundamental astrology. You see, the alternation between light and dark is the essence of astrology. It's the basis for all its fucking meaning. If you can't understand that most basic point, that astrology is about light and dark, look at the chart here. You see the ascendant-descendant axis? Let me go to this thing. You see the ascendant-descendant axis here? That's the horizon when you were born. This was the eastern horizon. And the sign that was rising up over it as you took your first breath is your rising sign, which in this case was Libra for this chart. You see? And then the midheaven, right? MC stands for Medium Coeli. Yeah? That was the highest point in the sky when you were born. So all this stuff that was above the horizon, right? This new moon here, this Venus, Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter, these were all visible when this person was born. And everything, right? And we called it the south, yes? The high point in the sky. And then everything down here, right, is called the north. All that was invisible. It was on the dark side of the earth when this person was born. You see? This notion of light and dark is the most essential and important thing in all of astrology. We call it sect, and it determines your best and worst planets. These are more things for a lesson later. But it's important when you're talking about sidereal astrology, because when you let the signs drift relative to the solstices and equinox points, then you're going to have all these signs move. And you're going to lose what? The whole symbolism. If you let Libra drift relative to the equinox, the autumnal equinox, it loses its meaning, right? The meaning of Capricorn comes from the fact that it's ruled by Saturn, right? The furthest visible planet, the coldest, darkest, right? And Capricorn was the coldest, darkest month of the year, the winter solstice, when the days are the shortest and the nights are the longest. And that's partly where its symbolism comes from too, not just Saturn, but the fact that it's at the winter solstice, the place of death, right? Death and resurrection. And that's a lot of where Capricorn gets its symbolism, you see. The same with Aries. The fact that it's at the vernal or spring equinox gives it a lot of meaning. Gemini, right? Look at the sign. I'm a Gemini, right? Gemini's leading up to what? Gemini's leading up to the summer solstice, isn't it? In terms of the calendar, it's leading up to the summer solstice, the bright spot of the year. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury, but it also is known for its youthfulness, right? Optimism, going outward, right? When a sign occurs between Aries and Cancer, you know, that's the waxing cycle. Or really, you could say from Aquarius to Cancer. That's the waxing cycle. You see? That's the waxing cycle. Well, and someone just asked about Jupiter. So, and by the waxing cycle, I mean that the sun is approaching, right? It's leaving the winter solstice and approaching the summer solstice. Whereas the waning cycle is the sun leaving the summer solstice and then thereby approaching the winter solstice. Yes? And this, we could see the symbolism of this alternation between light and dark in the religions and spiritual traditions of many ancient cultures, right? So I won't get into all that, of course. That's a video for another time. But then, for example, someone asked Sagittarius. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, right? And it's the sign immediately before the winter solstice. So you see, Sagittarius has an optimism, doesn't it? You know, it's right around the holiday season when people were, you know, imbibing and getting fucked up and shit like that, you know. But the winter solstice was a festival, a holy time for many ancient cultures, right? Because everyone could see the fucking solstice, you know, in ancient societies. So anyway, you see, this is why sidereal, it doesn't make sense to me in horoscopic astrology, because it rejects or dismisses all of that meaning of the solar cycle. The zodiac is defined by the seemingly unchanging rhythm of the solstices and equinoxes. Yes, we know that it's changing over time because we know about axial precession. However, the zodiac isn't tied to that because it's not tied to the fixed stars or constellations. You can look at fixed stars being, you know, conjunct a particular planet or angle. That's very important. But the zodiac isn't defined by the constellations or the fixed stars. Otherwise, you know, all the signs would be the size or reflect, right, those constellations, and they aren't. Right, they're ideal sections of 30 degrees off of a 360-degree circle. Yes? So once again, the reason why I think the sidereal zodiac is useless in horoscopic astrology is because it loses the symbolism, or one of the primary sources of the symbolism for each zodiacal sign, as we just talked about. The tropical year and the tropical zodiac are tied to the seasons. But really, by that we mean the solstices and equinoxes. And that's the basis for the symbolism underlying astrology. So I hope that's useful and meaningful for you all. I hope that makes sense. And there's so much more history that goes into it, you see. There's so much more history. And we don't have time to go through it all because, you know, we're already 40 minutes in. So anyway, Shaima was first. Shaima was first. Oh, and today is Amber, my dear friend Amber, Amber Gregory. It's her birthday today. Amber, it's your birthday. Happy birthday, Amber. Okay, we're gonna go to Shaima. Where's Shaima's chart? Shaima. Oh, I see Shammy. Okay, I have. Oh, Lighthouse Dreamer, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there. Thank you so much for your donation. I'm so sorry I missed it. I'm so sorry I missed it. Thank you so much, Lighthouse. Do you want a reading, my darling? And please, Lighthouse Dreamer, please put your information in the chat, sweetheart. Please put your information in the chat. Please, please, please. If you're still here. I don't know who stayed after all that. But since we have Shaima's stuff up, let's just double check. Can I have a mini solar return reading? So I'll look at your solar return. What's your birthday? August 13th. So coming right up. So for people who don't know about this, a solar return reading is looking at the chart for when the sun passes or conjoins the exact degree and minute of your sun at your birth. Yes. Oh, Lighthouse, please, do we have your birth info? Please, Lighthouse, put your birth info in the chat. Thank you, my darling. You're wonderful. Date, time, city. Good job, Lighthouse. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So anyway, we're going to look at a brief solar return for Shaima. Oops. Shaima. Return. Okay. And let's throw this up. So thank you, Shaima, for donating. You're so sweet. Thank you. So this is Shaima's solar return. Now you notice how it's got a different ascendant and all sorts of different stuff. I look at the solar return chart on its own quickly, and then I look at how it aspects the natal chart. So number one, we got Mars conjunct Jupiter. And this is a big deal, right? Because this is sort of an explosive thing. Now it's in the second house, right, of this particular chart. So we see sort of a conflict between gain and loss, right? And I don't mean loss in the 8th house sense. I mean more like you spending too much, or having to spend too much money, or having a little bit of over-optimism about your financial situation. So the indication here is to save. Now, of course, Jupiter is here too, conjunct Mars. Jupiter conjunct Mars makes things bigger, right? So you have the potential for monetary gain over this next year, between your birthday and your next birthday. But you also have the potential for losing money, right? Through your own volition, through spending too much. So just be aware of that balance, because this is indicating that you can get some luck with finances, but you need to save. Now, Uranus is conjunct the ascendant, right? Which sort of indicates a lot of ups and downs over the year, right? Unexpected things that come out of left field, right? So this will be an interesting year for you. Now, Venus relatively conjunct Mercury, a retrograde Mercury, right? So this is going to be, a year where you got to watch out for your technological stuff, watch out for your technology, right? And you may feel a bit more introverted, perhaps, when it comes to your speech and your thinking, more contemplative and thoughtful, right? You may be interested in creative pursuits this year, something artistic perhaps, or musical, right? But it'll be a little bit quieter, right? A more contemplative year. And then the moon is in Scorpio in the 7th house here, which sort of indicates really having a desire towards a relationship, but at the same time having some fear and paranoia, right? And perhaps very strong emotions and feelings that it's hard to sort of deal with and, not suppress necessarily, but process. You know, sometimes we avoid our emotions with the Scorpio moon thing. And then, of course, retrograde Saturn in the 11th house sort of indicates having strains, right? Strains from groups or friends. But the other side of it is sort of being a little melancholy, right? Losing your sense of optimism. So the key thing for this is just remembering there's light at the end of the tunnel, that things are getting better, you know? It's just, it can be a little melancholy. So you have to remind yourself. But how does this interact with your natal chart, right? So let's go to your natal chart here. Shaima. And then we'll move on to Lighthouse Dreamer. I'm so grateful to both of you. I'm so grateful to both of you. Thank you so much for your support. So here's Shaima's chart. We're going to look at it in a bi-wheel. That's where we have overlay. We have two charts, one overlaid on the other one. Two charts. Two of charts. Two charts that beat as one. Two of charts. I need you. I need you. Does anyone know the song Two of Hearts? I think it was like an 80s song. Two of hearts, two hearts that beat as one, two of hearts. I need you, I need you. Francesca. Okay, Francesca, thank you for telling me. Am I saying that correctly, Francesca? My name's Frankie, and you're Francesca, so, you know. Or that's my real name. I prefer to go by Saturn Girl. I prefer to go by Saturn Girl. Wait, what? Properties. Does this, how is this going to look on here? I mean, let me do this other box. Where's this other box? I can use this, maybe. I can use this. Let me, I'm sorry. I got it. Top. I love to top, you know. I love topping. Wait, hold on. I'm so sorry. Okay, top now. I gotta stretch this. Wait, no. The fuck, yo. Okay, I've almost got it. I'm so sorry. No. No, no, no. They tell me to go to rehab. I don't know. I can't remember how the song goes. They tell me to go to rehab. And I said, no, no, no. Oh, wait, no. That goes down. Right? And this goes up. Right? Okay. There we go. There we go. That's good enough. Okay. For overlays, right? So this is quite interesting because the moon is on top of Mercury, right? So this is a lot of processing big emotions. Yeah. Wait, why is this? No, 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 no. This is all wrong. This is all wrong. This is all wrong. Bi-wheel. God, I hate this shit sometimes. I hate this shit sometimes. It's so fucking stupid. Natal. Why is it doing that? September 28th, 2007. Why is it doing that shit? Ugh. Why is this doing this? This is so fucking stupid. Edit chart. The fuck is this shit? I'm sorry, everyone. For some reason, when I press animate in Solar Fire, it goes to like some other fucking shit. Where's Shima's shit? I don't mean literally. Shima. 8:13:73 1:15 a.m. Baghdad, Iraq. Our friend from Iraq. Why did that happen? There we go. Okay. Shima has a Gemini rising. August 13th, 1973, 1:15 a.m. Baghdad, Iraq. Okay. Now, let's do the fucking bi-wheel, because I really have to get to Francesca. Our dear friend, Francesca. Our dear friend, Francesca. Okay, here we go. Properties. Now this should be, whatever. I'm just gonna read it as is. So you still have, right? Now Jupiter and Mars go into the first house. So this is pretty interesting. On the one hand, it represents some gain and increase. And probably psychologically, you get more optimism, which is sort of ironic with the Saturn, in the 11th house and the last thing, right? So this is this sort of balance between having to hold a vision, right, in order to combat or alleviate that sense of despondency or melancholy that may pop up, right? But it's quite interesting. Now it's 10 degrees away, but it's still interesting that these are relatively close to your ascendant, right? So on the one hand, there's sort of an expansion of your mind, your optimism, yes, in your personality and how you feel about yourself. In the midst of that, though, there's a bit of frustration, anger, and hasting. What do we call that? Haste. Right? Trying to move too quickly through things. You have to be careful. This could symbolize surgery, right? It could symbolize a small injury. Mars is like cuts, scrapes, burns, bruises, that kind of thing. So be careful, like watch what you're doing. And I know this is a whole annual thing, but it's just something to be aware of. Now, of course, Pluto's interesting there, being relatively close to Jupiter, but Pluto's such a slow-moving planet, that we wouldn't really be too concerned with it unless it was hitting an angle in your chart. The ascendant, descendant, midheaven, or IC. But Saturn in your 10th house, not too far away from your natal midheaven, right? So this indicates feeling a sense of losing direction or having to figure out a new direction. You see, when this happens, life sort of shifts you into a new direction, which is quite interesting and it's quite important because we have expectations about the way we're supposed to go. And Saturn going through our 10th house basically tells us, you better let go of those expectations because they ain't going to work out. And it can feel quite depressing because we're like, oh shit, things didn't go my way. But ultimately, it pushes you in a new direction so that you find a new way. Yes? And life shifts, sometimes in good ways. Now, we saw that Saturn was in the 11th house in the straight up just solar return chart, right? Which also indicates struggling with optimism. Yeah. But you can see the North Node there in your natal 11th house, right? Which sort of also indicates this need to cultivate that optimism, as I just said a second ago, right? We talked about the Scorpio moon thing indicating, right, some very complex emotions, having to face trauma, maybe difficulty with the mother, but I mean, you're 10 years older than me, so your mother may no longer be with us. So, right? Now, Venus and Mercury in your fourth house natally, right? This is connection to your land of birth in your country. Maybe you have to go back home for a journey. Maybe it'd be a short journey, the place of your birth. I'm not sure. But it can also indicate having to build up your own home space, right? Looking for, a new living situation, perhaps, or getting, digging into your ancestors and your family history. So a lot of stuff like that, building up relationships again with people from your place of birth, right? Your homeland or your natal ideologies or family history in some way. So this is all very important stuff, right? And there's a lot of things to be optimistic about. With the moon in the sixth house, we talked about some health stuff with the first house. And the sixth house with the moon there also indicates having to face, some physical maladies, perhaps illnesses, a chronic illness, facing it and healing, right? It's all about healing. But anyway, let's go to the next person, right? I'm sorry I took... No. No. Stupid. Ugh. The fuck? Why does everything have to suck? Okay, we're doing Francesca. Let me put Francesca's stuff in here. Francesca. She said, my name is Francesca. Hello, my name is what? My name is... Chicka Francesca. Chicka Francesca. Okay. Excuse me. We have November the 25th. 69. 69. You're just a little bit younger than my sister. You're just a little bit younger than my sister. Happy birthday, Amber. Happy birthday. Oh, Ms. Colston is here. I gotta get you too. Ms. Colston. And I'll get Amber since it's her birthday. Since it's her birthday. Happy birthday, Amber. Okay, Francesca. I'm totally out of coffee after this. I need more coffee. I need more coffee. I need more allowance. There we go. Here we go. Now we have Francesca. Are you still here, Francesca? Please let me know if you're still here. If you're just joining us, please like the fucking stream. Subscribe to my channel. I'm like barely at 2,500 subscribers. I need to get a lot more. I need to get to 5,000. And everyone's helping me make strides, but I really need your help. And just so you know, I prioritize donations and members when it comes to these live readings, okay? Because we live in capitalism, unfortunately. So, yay! Francesca's still here. And Francesca, it looks like, is a Virgo rising. And with Pluto conjunct the rising, this is a creepy girl. A creepy, creepy girl. You probably have a very powerful personality without realizing it. People with Pluto aspecting the ascendant, I have it square, right? Oftentimes we have this presence, right? This disturbing presence oftentimes. People can sense our powerful presence. And we can walk into a room and just piss everybody off. Because everyone's like, who the fuck does she think she is? And there's something interesting about that. Because oftentimes we feel powerless as children, right? The Plutonian experience is about having our power ripped away. So oftentimes we get sort of entranced with power as we got older, you know? And by that I mean, oftentimes the most constructive way is with kink stuff, you know? Like for me, expressing power and all that stuff, it's most constructive in sexual relationships in a healthy and consensual way, of course, as opposed to trying to assert myself on other people. There's healthy ways to experience that, but we become infatuated with things like dominance or submission because it's very attractive to us, this whole thing about power. Pluto rules power, you see. And Pluto also was very paranoid to lose his wife Persephone, the queen of the underworld. Yeah. So Pluto also has this paranoia in relationships. We get very toxic. We tried to hold on, and the thing about relationships is they don't get fulfilling until we have the confidence to walk away. Doesn't mean we have to walk away. It means that until we have the confidence to do so, we let people treat us like shit, because that's codependency. And you see, you have your North Node in the 7th house, which means the South Node's in the 1st house, indicating that your youth was all about learning self-reliance and independence, probably. Yes. And then as you got older, as you got into your 40s, maybe relationships took on an added importance in your life, you see? And that how you related to yourself, learning about yourself as a person, contributed to being able to function more securely in relationships. I don't know if you're in a relationship or if any of this makes sense, but this is how I would typically read it, you see? This is how I typically read it. Excuse me. And if we want to understand the quality of your relationships, we really should look at the ruler of your 7th house, which is Jupiter, in the 2nd house, right? Which indicates to me that material stability was very important to you from a partner. You don't want to pay for someone else, right? You don't want someone else to drain your resources necessarily. You want someone who's stable and has their shit together. Maybe someone who's even a little bit successful. Someone who brings something to the relationship, not someone you have to prop up and take care of. You don't want another child. I don't know if you have any children, but if you do, you probably had them later in life. And one of them is probably involved in spiritual stuff or religion or academia, philosophy, or the law, right? Legal things. So I don't know. But you see, your moon up here at the top of the chart is very auspicious too. Conjunct your midheaven, right? This indicates your sensitivity and your sort of natural flux and influx of all these sorts of things is what makes you relatively successful, The moon at the top of the chart like that is pretty auspicious. And the moon rules Cancer, which is the next sign, the 11th house. And so that sort of indicates to me that you get your success through meeting people, through networking, through friends or supporters or groups, Now, Mercury rules your 10th house and isn't very happy in the 4th house. I don't know if you work from home or anything like that, or if you had anything to do with, we see real estate here. But usually we see people working out of the home. But I think you probably had a difficulty with finding your way with career stuff, or maybe it was up and down, because Mercury's not happy. And I'd also expect to see a bit of ADHD, perhaps, with that unhappy Mercury. You're still very intelligent, Still very intelligent, it looks like. So Francesca says, no, no, no. So she's singing Rehab. No, no, no. Francesca tried to make me go to rehab, and she said, no, no, no. So, I mean, if none of this rings true, that's, It's because I'm not infallible. I'm reading your chart. Do I have all your information correct? November the 25th. Yes, 69. Pittsburgh, 1:32 a.m. Okay. So you have Saturn in the ninth house like I do, and retrograde. This can be quite difficult because oftentimes we grow up in a religious family. You know, either one or both of our parents are religious, or we go to a religious school. But something when we're young, we have a bad experience of religion sometime when we're young, oftentimes. Either we go, like I said, to a religious school or whatever. And sometimes it makes us very skeptical or scientific or even atheistic when we're younger. But we still feel this lack of meaning. And we crave a sense of truth and understanding. It's just that other people's word for it doesn't make sense to us anymore. We can't just trust other people's word for things. We can't just take other people's understanding. We have to develop our own, and we won't be satisfied with anything but our own realizations typically. You see? We won't be satisfied with anything short of that. Now with Chiron in the 8th house, life is sort of like learning about loss, unfortunately. It's about learning to let go. And we typically do that through dealing with loss. You see? We typically do that by dealing with loss. I imagine money's been up and down. You see, because Venus rules your 2nd house and is not happy in Scorpio. The other thing we see with Venus and Scorpio, sort of awkwardness, social awkwardness. Venus doesn't know what to do with herself in Scorpio, She, in Taurus, the opposite sign, right, that she rules, she's sensual. She doesn't have to, she doesn't have to work for social grace. People come to her. She gets suitors and admirers, right? Whereas Venus in Scorpio is a bit more paranoid about relationships and social interaction. It could be more awkward. It has a less easy time letting things come to it. In fact, it might try too hard. It might get obsessed with a certain person, or unrequited love, that sort of thing. You like people who don't like you, oftentimes, and not like people don't like you, but people who might not be romantically, attracted to you or whatever. So, that can be a difficult one. But still, I imagine that you're a good communicator. You're probably a good communicator. You might have a job or a vocation that requires you to speak and write, or maybe advertise or connect with people, right? And once again, that sort of works with the networking thing that we perhaps see when it comes to your jobs or your career or life direction. Maybe you get known for groups or associations or those types of things you might be in. You see? So anyway, now just in terms of timing, because we got to move on to Ms. Colston. In terms of timing, Jupiter's going through your 10th house right now. So this is a time when success is possible. Now this is a longer transit because it goes until June of next year. But this is a time we'd expect new opportunities to sort of surface, yes? To move in new directions that are opportunistic for you, to get support or visibility, right? Sometimes it's a mentor, oftentimes when it comes to career. Oh, you're asking about marriage. I mean, the big thing, you said there's no relationship. You have to have a relationship first before you get married. But right now you have Saturn going through your 7th house for the next year until June of next year, right? I believe it's June. So, a little bit more than a year and a half. And what Saturn in the 7th house does is strain current relationships, right? It's no wonder you're asking about marriage, because this is really what's forefront in your mind psychologically, right? As Saturn goes through here. And since your North Node and stuff are here, you have a strong desire for that sort of bond, right? But the other thing that Saturn in the 7th house does is it deepens commitments. So if you do meet someone, I don't think you're going to get married right away. Now, I'll look at your zodiacal releasing really quick because I'm a nice girl. But we usually don't have time for this. I'm going to look at your zodiacal releasing. I'm not going to throw it up on the screen because it's too much fucking effort. We lost too much time trying to resize the last fucking window. So 69. If you dudes are us, what number are we thinking of? 69, dudes. That was from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I don't know if any of you remember that movie, but it was good. Pittsburgh. Excuse me. So let's go to your lot of Eros, which is the lot of love. Oh, let me look at your chart quick. So your part of fortune, so your peak periods are the mutable axis. You have what's called a night chart, right? Meaning the sun was below the horizon, which means your worst planet is Saturn and your best planet is Venus. And you have them opposite each other, which can be quite, it's the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times and the worst of times. So your Scorpio periods would probably tend to be your best, but your most active periods would be the mutable signs. So you're in a Capricorn period right now. Nothing really going on there. Capricorn. I guess you could look at Jupiter here and say Jupiter is overcoming the 5th house. You won't know what that means, but that's okay. But suffice it to say that this may be a good period, which started in 2022 and goes until 2025. And this is level 2, you see. I can't explain all this right now. I don't have time. But you're going into a Virgo period on level 3 here in September, mid-September. And it'll go through the beginning of November, right? So it's about a month. And I suggest that if you're interested in marriage, you put yourself out there. You just said you don't have a relationship. And I wonder why. I wonder if you've been socializing. Once again, it's hard for Scorpio Venus to socialize. In order to get married, you have to go out and meet people, right? I suggest going on dating apps. I've got a bunch of dating apps that I casually go through each day while I'm drinking my coffee. I have a wonderful girlfriend who I love, and I'm also a big slut, and we're both poly, So that's still sort of part of my active life. I love you, Bexy. You're so sweet. I should look at the chat. Divorced. So there may be issues with your partner that are kind of coming up right now, or your ex. You could have that too. You could have them stirring up trouble in your life. But if you do go out and you connect with someone, see, I don't know what you mean no about. I have no clue what, like, when you say no, yes, no. I'm not sure what you're referring to. So maybe if you can, because there's a delay, please be more specific and say what you mean no about. What you mean no about. Excuse me. So, let me go back to this. Yay, you're sweet, Bexy. Oh, look at this. You're in a Sagittarius period right now, which is definitely active on level 4. So for the next several days, I would suggest you get on dating apps if you aren't already. You have to start meeting people, Well, you can't marry anyone if you're not fucking dating, can you, Francesca? I mean, on what planet does that make sense? You want to not date and just have someone magically appear? See, this is why I can't stand fucking witches with their manifestation. I manifested this. You got to work for it. You got to get out there. You got to go to events or parties. Join mutual interest groups. If you're into astrology, look for an astrology group in your area. Look for a spiritual group. I don't know. Do you like hiking? Go on Meetup and look for a hiking group. Maybe you'll meet someone. I like dating apps because most people are on there just wanting to fuck, at least on the ones I'm on and the people that I'm typically meeting. You know, I got lucky meeting Bexy for sure, but you got to put yourself out there. Get on dating apps. Take some cute pictures of yourself. You work. What does work have to do with dating? Work has nothing to do with dating. I work too. And still dating is like, I have like 5 important things in my life that I have to sort of balance. I have my daughter number 1, my work number 2, and then dating and relationships is a close 3, number 3. Then I have roller skating and I have shooting because I'm a roller skating enthusiast and I love guns. What the hell? Focus. But I haven't been shooting or roller skating lately because dating is the most important to me. You know, sex and relationships is sort of trumping all of it. So, you know, when I'm not with my daughter and I'm not working, I'm dating and doing fun things, you know? So please, if you want to get married, you got to put yourself out there. You was just wondering if you say marriage, that's all. In general, I mean, you've already been married, so we know that marriage was in the cards for you. I mean, I wouldn't venture to say how many marriages. You can look at Jupiter, and you can see that Jupiter's in the 2nd house, and not unhappy, right? The last Libra in a night chart. What degree? 26 degrees. Huh. I mean, it's the Saturn thing. Oh, Scorpio. No, okay, it's not the Jupiter bounder term. I'm looking at something else. But anyway, Jennifer, thank you, sweetheart. Stephanie, we'll get to you in just a second. Anyway. Level 3. Starting 2025, you're going to be in an Aquarius period ruled by Mars, so that will be a difficult time for you in terms of love and marriage. There may be a breakup if, you know, but you said you haven't met anyone, so. You said you haven't met anyone. Aquarius contains Mars. That's a rough thing. But the other great thing, oops, the fuck. But the great thing about that is that Venus is overcoming it, right? So this could still be a relatively good period on the one hand, but it's surmountable difficulties when it comes to your love life. So you may get frustrated or meet some people that don't quite match your expectations. But then there's good stuff that happens out of this too. So now this starts March of 2025. March of 2025. So just be aware of that. In the meantime, though, there's still, you know, interesting stuff going on, right? So Saturn's going through your 7th house. Could be clearing the way for opportunities, yeah? Or it could represent making a deeper commitment. But we'll see how that goes for you. Just creeps. Just creeps. I'm sorry. Who is next? Who is next? But yeah, I mean, the big thing for you is Saturn going through your 7th house. Jupiter's going through your 10th house, and Jupiter rules relationships too, for you, right? Because it's your 7th house ruler. So I still think this next year is an opportunity to put yourself out there. If you're interested in relationships, but you have to make effort, you know, go on dating apps. Just a couple. I get the most luck on Bumble and Field. So I suggest those, but other people really like Tinder and Plenty of Fish and what are the other ones? Okay, Cupid. I don't know. Hinge is another one that, people do really well on. So, anyway, I only focus on 2 of them now because I have a wonderful girlfriend and I'm not like itching necessarily, but I'm a slut and I like, being a slut, unfortunately. Or fortunately for me. So, gosh, what's Mercury doing for you? Going back into your 12th house, right? So facing unresolved trauma and unresolved self-destructive patterns, perhaps, having to reflect. So, tiny, yes, tiny if you're queer like us. If you're queer like me and Bexy, then tiny, definitely. So, who's next? Oh, Ms. Colston, I'm so sorry. Fuck, Ms. Colston. Ms. Colston. I'll look at, what should I look at for you? Solar return, perhaps? Your birthday's in December, so I don't know if you're interested in that yet. And Bexy, we have to go to that. We have to go to that mixer on Thursday. We should go. We should go. So I think I've looked at your zodiacal releasing before, Ms. Colston, but you also have a night chart, meaning Venus is your best planet. And where's Venus? Oh, you see, the fixed cross for you. So you have your best and your worst planet opposite each other also. Amber, stop whining. Stop whining. So we have, your fixed cross with the 2 benefics, Jupiter and Venus. And then your, what's called your outest sect malefic, your hardest, most difficult planet, which is Saturn. Your second most difficult is Mars, right? You have Mars conjunct the sun like me, Oh, you're interested in solar return. But anyway, I just think it's interesting to see. You do have a pretty good configuration in that all of your peak periods would be surmountable difficulties, right? With added luck that comes out of it, right? There would be subjectively good experiences that were accompanied by more difficult ones. You see, because Jupiter is overcoming Saturn and Venus is opposite. So you see, these 2 guys or girls or, people are making Saturn a bit nicer, but at the same time, Saturn is sort of mitigating the nice things that Venus could bring. So let's look at a solar return really quick. Where? Return. There we go. Solar return. We got Venus conjunct Pluto at that time. Venus conjunct Pluto. That's pretty wild. I'd see that as, perhaps some sort of sexual impropriety. I mean, I shouldn't say impropriety. I mean a focus on sexual things, perhaps. You see? It could be dark aesthetic, dark creativity in some way. It could be unconventional love, the darker side of intensity and obsession. And look, Venus is opposite Mars, once again, sort of indicating sexual stuff. We'll look at how this interacts with your natal chart in just a second. And of course, the other notable thing, number 1 is Saturn going through the 3rd house here in the solar return, which sort of indicates feeling stuck or not being able to get out, get out of your community. There could be issues that arise with siblings through this whole thing, but usually it more manifests as sort of an inability to speak up or speak out, feeling once again more contemplative and less able to just, you know, come out and express yourself. And then we have these two guys in the 12th house. You see the Sun and Mercury. Do you think solar returns should be calculated using the birthplace or relocation place? No, the birthplace. Nope. Always the birthplace. I refuse to use the relocation place. I know some astrologers are really into that, but no. I took classes on this from, what's her name? The fuck's her name? Who's always on the astrology podcast. The fuck is her name? She's Australian. God, what's her name? Ugh. What's her name? That's gonna kill me. What the fuck is her name? Someone remind me. Someone remind me what her name is. Ugh. She's a famous Australian astrologer. She's always on the astrology podcast. I can't remember her fucking name. God damn it. I'm on her newsletter. God, I feel like my brain is dying. I feel like my brain is dying. This is gonna kill me. The fuck is her name? What is her name? There's Demetra George in here. Kelly Surtees. Kelly Surtees. That's her fucking name. I took a class on synastry, on progressions, and solar returns from Kelly Surtees, and both of them are pretty good. Or, yeah, but I guess all three of them are pretty good. So I do recommend her. Anyway. So, I was good at all those before I took the classes, but I got better. Let's look at how this interacts with your natal chart. Bi-wheel. Go back to your natal chart. I hate fucking... See, this is like the gold standard of programs of astrology software. Solar Fire. And yet it does all this weird fucking shit. I feel like I need to... Am I doing synastry as well? I can. If you want to look at synastry really quick, I can. You know? Bi-wheel. If you want to look at synastry, we can. Just put your information in there. Here's Ms. Colston. And here's the solar return. Solar return. Oh, I just read the description. Yeah, I mean, the description is more or less just a guide. You know? The description is more or less just a guide. And I talked about all my sidereal shit already. I want to clip it into a video. Oops. Okay. Top. Okay. Done. We can mostly see it, right? We can mostly see it. Ms. Colston. So the cool thing you see about this right off the bat, right, is you have some of this stuff up in the 10th house here. The moon conjunct the north node, which sort of indicates You know, on the one hand, the moon in Aries sort of indicates a lot of activity, sometimes a bit of a temper, maybe a little bit of aggression, you know. Sherry Berry says equal or whole sign houses. I only use whole sign houses. There's evidence that shows equal is very, very old, going back to like the 1st century BCE or something like that. But I only use whole sign houses because it's the original and the most, to me, it's the best house system. It just works better. And in order to do a lot of these techniques that I do, you have to use whole sign houses. So anyway, there may be a little aggression coming up, you know, a lot of activity, maybe more exuberance or being outgoing. But the moon is also conjunct the North Node in the 10th house. Excuse me. So this is an auspicious time for sort of new directions to emerge or new enthusiasm about the direction that you're headed in, you know. You may get some elevated recognition, right? People might see the stuff that you do well, yeah. Now, Saturn going through the 9th house in conjunct your midheaven, that also indicates struggles, right? And Chiron is in the 10th house too. So that does indicate struggles, hitting roadblocks and setbacks, but also having a lot of optimism and recognizing that there's some focus on career and life direction right now, you see? So, along with that, though, I mean, it's your solar return, so Venus is always going to be relatively close. But you got Pluto on top of your Venus, which is also indicating all that obsessive stuff I said earlier. If you're not in a relationship, and if you're sort of just solitary and not putting yourself out there whatsoever, this could indicate, right, when this happened to me, it was opposite, but still. It was when I had my divorce, you know? And oftentimes, there's big upheavals in our social and relationship lives, you know? When Pluto aspects the moon in one of these solar returns or in a transit chart, we have big upheavals in our emotions, sometimes violent or depressing and intense emotions. It's like a bloodletting, right? And this is sort of the same thing happening to you with Pluto on your Venus, right? There's big upheavals in the way you relate to people. You may have relationships end, right? Including friendships, right? But Venus is in the 8th house here, so it also indicates forgiveness and reconciliation. So if you did have schisms or conflicts with people, especially friends, Venus rules the 11th house, also the 6th house. It could mean that there's quantum wave function. I'm sorry, quantum function. We'll get to you in just a second. But that's quite interesting, you see, because it amplifies, number one, the social awkwardness, which could make you aware of all these needs for upheavals, right? For confidence. Pluto's power, right? If there have been weaknesses in your character or shyness or, you know, a sense of people pleasing and stuff like that, Pluto's going to force you to face those things, sometimes painfully so. Right? So be aware of it. And then you see Jupiter in the 12th house too. Indicates that this year is also one of healing. Right? So it's very interesting. Venus is in your 8th house and Pluto on top of your natal Venus. Yeah. That's all very interesting because on the one hand, Venus in the 8th house is forgiveness and healing in that way. But then Jupiter in the 12th house is mental healing, healing trauma and all these sorts of things. Right? It's a year of facing hard truths. It's what a lot of this stuff is for you. But it's all very good because it's catharsis. We learn to let things go, right? Because we've sort of resolved our relationship to them. And forgiveness is letting things go, isn't it? You probably heard me say that 1,000 times, Ms. Colston. You know, and then there's an indication of physical healing with the sun and everything in the 6th house. Now, the sun is always going to be in your 6th house at your solar return. But with Mercury there too, right? And it's a retrograde Mercury, of course. So you see, there's difficulty with communication once again. difficulty with thinking, perhaps. Perhaps you're scattered or your brain is scattered. And it takes extra effort to organize yourself around this time. And Mercury's on top of Mars, once again indicating sort of aggressive speech, right? So you have to watch this sort of dynamic between the Aries moon and the Sagittarius Mercury on top of your Mars, right? Because it can be harsh words. So you see, on the one hand, you're going to be having this active, maybe assertive personality, and probably a tendency to spend money, right? So make sure you start saving. And Venus in the 8th house is good for saving. But you're having all these intense emotions and facing healing both mentally and physically. And at the same time, you're going to have the energy to do it, right? Thank God you have it. And thank God you're going to have this optimism, you see? So anyway, that's the way I read it, And we'll look at quantum wave function. And who else did I miss? I still have to do Stephanie Caldwell. And Jennifer Casey, did you need readings? Did you need a reading, Jennifer? Anyone else? Because I'm going to do Stephanie. Please like the stream and subscribe to my fucking channel. It's like the least. Everyone can do. And please, if you can't donate, just watch my videos. I didn't forget you, Amber. I'm doing members first. I know you're a fucking member, but I've got quantum wave function. So slow your roll. I don't care if it's your birthday. Chill out. I'm so mean to Amber. I'm so mean to Amber, but she needs it. She needs it. Where the fuck is quantum? Yay, Stephanie, I got you in just a minute. Amber, I'll get to you. You just need to relax. Where the fuck is quantum? Where's the quantum? Just another quantum function. Thank you, quantum. Thank you. Thank you, quantum. You are so sweet. Okay. Here's quantum. Quantum's chart. Pisces rising. So the big thing is Saturn going through your first house. And you're at your Saturn opposition. Which is a big deal, isn't it? It's halfway through the Saturn cycle, So there's a tension here. There's sort of a struggle going on. Because Saturn going through your 7th house, or Saturn in the 7th house in natal often represents sort of, sort of avoiding relationships or a hyper independence. It comes from a mistrust of people. Someone taught you when you were young that you couldn't trust other people. But now Saturn going through your first house is totally disturbing your relationship to yourself. It's quite amazing. I guess we can look at your solar return too, if you wanted to look at that quantum function. But just the fact Saturn going through your first house is such a big deal until next year. And see, this is remaking how you feel about yourself, what you know about yourself. You could lose weight. You could get, if you have chronic health conditions, they could get worse. It's a difficult period, but it's also the most rewarding period because you come out of it with greater self-knowledge. Like I always tell people, I came out as trans when Saturn was in my first house. I got faced with all these things from when I was a kid that I had never resolved. And so things come back up from our past. Yes? And they have to be integrated into our experience. And we psychologically process them by feeling them. We start to feel our own mortality. When Saturn was in my first house, I went through this whole death exercise where I I put myself in that psychological space that I had just died, and that I was dying. And this is very important because that's the reward of Saturn going through our first house. We feel like we get older on the one hand. we feel more mature, but we also face death a bit. It's like the awareness of the inevitability of our death really sort of bursts into our consciousness. Like, I was like, holy fuck, I'm gonna die. Like, someday I'm gonna die. And I don't know for sure if consciousness persists. In the end, it doesn't really matter anyway. But, excuse me. But the amazing thing about this is it helps to really appreciate life. Because until you're aware of the inevitability of death, you don't really taste. You don't taste life, the quality of life. So this is a very, it can feel melancholy. It can feel depressing. But in the end, this is essential to your development as a person, as a conscious being. You see? So, I don't know. Solar return really quick, I guess. Let's look at that shit. I guess we started talking about solar returns today. I really like progressions. I'm not a super big fan of solar returns, like not as much as progressions. Yeah, you do have a lot of health issues. Just realize this is a temporary thing. Everything will get better starting January, or start to get better. And when we get out of this around summer of next year, you're going to feel a lot of relief. You're going to feel a lot of relief. So solar return. Is this the right one? No. Okay, here we go. Quantum. Where the fuck is your other chart? I need to get rid of some of the charts in here. I have too many in my little window here. Quantum, quantum, quantum. Too many fucking charts, yo. There we go. Quantum. So okay, yeah. So Gemini Sun, 0 degrees. Sun in the 9th house. This is probably a time of spiritual reawakening. It's a time when you're starting to focus on these more subjective pursuits again, or philosophy or spirituality in general, right? This would have started in May, of course. What are you doing, cat? Don't step on my shit. You see, so this would have started in May. Now, it could also indicate foreign travel, right? Long journeys, foreign travel. Sort of interesting. Sort of interesting. Mars conjunct the North Node in the 7th house. Now, I don't necessarily want to look at that in a negative way, but sometimes it does indicate breakups or splits. Could also indicate the deepening of a relationship. It could also indicate, dating again or getting back out there. So that's quite interesting. Saturn going to the 6th house also indicates, right, the health issues, the chronic health issues coming back up. But we're going to look at this in a bi-wheel. In a bi-wheel. In a bi-wheel. Quantum. Quantum, quantum. And then I said we get to Stephanie Caldwell. She's been very, 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 she's been very patient. You see, it's not, I have perfect 20/20 vision. It's not that I can't see this stuff. It's that I have like severe neurodivergence and dyslexia. So, I mean, I have severe ADHD and dyslexia. I have mild, probably neurodivergence. Quantum wave function. Oh, wait, no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Why does everything suck? Why does everything have to fucking suck? Why does everything have to suck? I'm a whiner. I'm sorry, but I fucking whine. Like when I break a nail, the fucking world is over, you know? I'm such a little bitch. I'm such a little bitch. And there we go. So this is the bi-wheel. Saturn, of course, conjunct the ascendant. That is amazing for a solar return. Like I said, I don't particularly enjoy solar returns. I mean, they're interesting, of course. But this is a big fucking deal because this sort of highlights, right? This sort of highlights the difficulty you're going through with big changes. It's like being a butterfly that's in that painful cocoon phase. You see? Saturn is sitting on your ascendant here, indicating that there's big changes going on, but they're not easy. They're slow coming because Saturn is slower. You see, this is a process developing over that whole next year. You see? But that's just an annoying inconvenience, so it's valid. Oh yeah, everything's an annoying inconvenience, isn't it? You know, you got the moon in the 8th house. Once again, indications of healing, right? Healing through all this stuff. I'm not too worried about Pluto, to be honest, here, because it's not really aspecting a lot. It's not really aspecting a lot. I guess you could say, I mean, no, it's not really aspecting a lot. You could say your sun, right? It's trine your sun, just like it's trine my sun, which once again means, you know, they say transformation, but it's dealing with crises. Now it's a trine, so the crises aren't as bad, but they're still crises. You know, things force you to face parts of yourself you didn't want to see your face, and it can be very uncomfortable. Like something might come out that embarrasses you. Like you could have a really heavy, embarrassing moment. You could have a real heavy sense of loss, or have an altercation that just a conflict with someone that leaves you like questioning yourself. Like what's wrong with me? What is all this? But you see, this is the opportunity to lead you into a greater understanding of yourself. You know, your girl needs to wait through the hard stuff to feel lighter on the other side. Yeah, but see, the thing that you may or may not see at the moment is that there's light really soon. You know, look in your solar return. Venus is conjunct Jupiter in your 3rd house. This is big stuff, and it's good stuff. There's a lot of luck here. You know, it could indicate siblings. It could indicate short journeys. But it also indicates intelligence, education, expression, media, speaking, writing. So you see, you're going to have greater diplomacy. You're going to have greater luck. You know, you're going to feel more intelligent. If you have anything to do with training people or teaching people, this is a wonderful time to experience that. And it's a very happy Venus. You know, it's a very happy Venus. And Venus also rules the 8th house, also indicating reconciliation and that sort of thing. Now, Mars in the North Node in your 2nd house, you have to be aware of saving money, right? And the moon's in your 8th house, which is all about debt, right? Now, it's about forgiveness, too, to a certain extent. And emotional growth, as you just said. But it also indicates like having to manage your resources, because there's going to be a tendency to want to squander them, right? Maybe it's overly with Jupiter conjunct Venus, it could be over optimism. Like, oh, things are so great. You know, I'm just going to go willy-nilly, you know, willy-nilly, willy-nilly. And the fact that this is halfway through a Saturn cycle is really sort of, you know, it's not necessarily auspicious or not auspicious, but it does indicate a time of conflict, a time of feeling strained and stretched too thin, right? Once again, this is showing you that you need to sort of shift course. You see, Saturn is naturally on your descendant, opposite your ascendant. So there's confidence issues. And Saturn's forcing you to face the weaker parts of yourself where you need to bring some strength and confidence, right? Because you may have some codependent issues here and there, even with the Leo moon, right? I mean, you have this natural sense of confidence probably, but people wouldn't see how mean you are to yourself underneath, right? So this is resolving a lot of those insecurities and weaknesses. Now it's not comfortable. You're gonna have to face a lot of stuff, but the payoff is pretty big in the end. And I think as we get to your next birthday, and especially a few months after, you're gonna feel a lot of relief, you know. So anyway, please like the stream if you haven't already. We'll get to you in a sec, Amber, but I told Stephanie Caldwell we'd get to her. I'm so sorry. You've been so patient, Stephanie. You really have. You really have. Just tell me if you're right here. I'm entering your stuff right now, Stephanie. I'm entering your stuff right now. So I really hope you're still here. I really hope you're still here. Pardon me for... Oops. What the fuck, yo? There we go. Okay. So we're entering Stephanie. Step on me, Stephanie. Wait, did I have your stuff in here? Where's Stephanie? That was a different Stephanie. Stephanie Caldwell. July 19th. Oh my god. Okay. I hate this shit. See, that's why I always say date time city. Because I get thrown off. And then Solar Fire starts throwing up errors. Errors. North Carolina. North Carolina. The Carolinas. There we go. Thank you, Quantum. Okay, Stephanie, here we go. We're finally at your chart. I'm so sorry. I hope all of your information is correct. I got July 19th, 89, Gastonia, North Carolina at 3:01 p.m. I hope that's all correct. So that puts you at Scorpio rising. Thank you, Quantum. So this puts you at Scorpio rising with Pluto exactly conjunct your ascendant, you know, by a few minutes. And this is quite an interesting thing. We already talked about what Pluto conjunct the ascendant means, you know, for I think one or two other people. We talked about the power thing, about feeling powerless as children and being infatuated with the sense of power, perhaps sometimes even death, you know. It can give us a darker aesthetic oftentimes, but usually we just sort of exude this presence from our personality. And it might be very off-putting to people. Sorry, I got cat hair everywhere. It might be very off-putting to people. As I indicated earlier, you know, it can be upsetting. People can get jealous, right? But on that same token, we have some issues, especially around relationships and control. Frequently, we get very uncomfortable being out of control. Or we see people who are very submissive, who really like to give control, who like someone to have power over them, right? And then the difficulty is the opposite, having to take responsibility and control of ourselves, right? I mean, I'm very much into kink and BDSM, and you understand how power exchange stuff, even on the submissive side, is still about power, individual power for that person as well. Because in giving up power, there's power that goes into that, isn't there? Excuse me. Moon in Aquarius, right? And Moon in the 4th house. Usually there's like an innate connection to your, you know, your culture, right? Your genealogical culture, your family history, or sometimes just history in general. You know, your ancestors, your homeland, stuff like that. Also your father. The 4th house also represents dad. And Saturn's in Capricorn, which is relatively happy, but, retrograde. So, dad may have been working a lot. Dad may have been, having to go off and do things. Or dad may have been well liked in the community. Although it's retrograde, so there, it may have been a bad experience of your father. I don't know. That could be a difficulty there. But Saturn in the third house also gives learning disabilities oftentimes, neurodivergence, speech impediments, a sense of intellectual inferiority, or sometimes something keeps you out of school, right? And I mean primary school, so before college. So, elementary, middle, and high school. Something can interfere with all that. Or you could be held back or some shit, or feel isolated at school. It's a frequent thing. But, excuse me. All this stuff at the top of your chart is quite interesting, conjunct your midheaven, Venus rules your 12th house and your 7th house. So on the one hand, you may find yourself being a little bit of a therapist to other people, People may confide in you, like give you their secrets or whatever, because they feel like you can relate to their trauma. Or maybe you're involved in therapy or social work or something like that. Sometimes when we see the 12th house ruler in the 10th house, we see people who work with other people's pain, That's a quite frequent thing. The 10th house is in the 9th house, though, which often has something to do with academia, right? Higher education, dealing with foreign stuff in general, philosophy, people who work with churches and nonprofits, or in legal issues, paralegals and that sort of thing. But the fact that the sun is there sort of more indicates very big melons. I love big melons. I love big melons. Yeah, Samir, I think I got what you were getting at, Mine aren't that big. Mine are not that big. But I still like them. I still like my little boobs. I still like my little boobs. The other thing about all this stuff at the top of the chart, right? You may also, with Venus ruling your 7th house, be attracted to like arm candy. Assuming that you're heterosexual, straight, or whatever. You like the dudes who everyone else sort of looks at. The dudes that other women talk about or find attractive. Probably the dudes that are a bit successful, have their shit together. When I see the 7th house ruler in the 10th house, I think of like the princess on the arm of the prince, like looking at him like, yes, I have my prince. I have my prince. And Venus and Leo can get a bit possessive. You see, possessive over partners. Now, when this is conjunct Mars, we also see people who have sort of a balanced gender presentation. You see, if people were born female, with this, you see people who may be more assertive or seen as more masculine, right? When women tend to be more assertive, it pisses men off, right? By and large. Please subscribe to my channel. Okay, please subscribe and like this stream. That helps me a lot. Watch my other videos, right? Watch my videos, the ones with the commercials, because that's how I make money sometimes, Thank you, Bexy. You are so sweet. You are so sweet. Anyway, so in terms of timing, you're having your Jupiter return now, right? Which is very auspicious. And being that it's the 8th house, it could be, sometimes we get luck from death, like an inheritance. We restructure our debt. We start to pay things off. We start to feel more relief in our financial situation. The other thing, too, is once again, learning to process trauma. Facing trauma from all this. And learning the beneficial side of loss and letting go, right? This is a big thing for you. It's your Jupiter return. It teaches us a lot of, the 8th house isn't necessarily pleasant. But Jupiter brings, a healing influence to help us face these difficult sides, right? Of our experience, stuff that we've never let go of. We carry the eighth house around like baggage. For those of you who are familiar with A Christmas Carol, right? With by Charles Dickens, it's like Jacob Marley carrying all the chains. And Jupiter helps us to let go of those things, not just forgiving other people, but forgiving ourselves, right? And then the big backdrop is Saturn going through your fifth house, which can make things difficult with our children. It can strain those relationships. But usually we feel like we're putting out lots of small fires all the time, you know? And in doing that, life feels chaotic. Like we can't get our footing. Things just keep popping out from this way and that way. And we feel like we can't relax or enjoy ourselves. And then when Saturn goes into the sixth house, that's when we start to pick up all the pieces from the previous cycle, which can be, not fun and difficult as well. But on the other hand, it's necessary, isn't it? So now Mercury is going retrograde back into your 10th house here really quick, which also indicates the need, or it can indicate new opportunities that you missed before. It can indicate hearing about a job opportunity, right? It could be getting contacted by a past employer, contacted by a past boss, or needing to go back and take care of something from previous employment, right? But usually the way I see this is like, hey, we applied for something months ago and never heard back. And then all of a sudden we hear back, right? After the 14th, between the 14th and the 28th. So that's a very important thing, you see. That could be very cool, right? On the other hand, Venus is in your 11th house, like needing to socialize and get out. So please, you do need to do that because it does indicate a social time, right? Mars is going through your 8th house right now, which is more difficult until September 4th. And it indicates, once again, unforeseen expenses, unforeseen losses, right? Could be losing value on an investment, that sort of thing. Having to put something on credit to pay off, right? So just be aware that saving money is very important at this time. And who else? We had Amber. Oh, and who else do we have on here? Jennifer Casey. Were you on here? Jennifer Casey, solar return. Let's look at Amber because it's her birthday and I was mean to her. Because I'm always mean to her. I'm always mean to Amber. You know how they say we always hurt the ones we love? Where's Amber? I'm always a bit mean to Amber. Where's your fucking chart, girl? Excuse me. Where the fuck is Amber's chart? Amber. Oh, I know I have it somewhere. Oh, here it is. There we go. So Saturn is going through your 6th house right now, and you've had your fair share of health issues. We know that. It's because I love you, yes. Excuse me. And then we have Jennifer Casey, I'm pretty sure. Excuse me. Okay. Oh, we should look at your solar return because it's your birthday, right? So the first thing to note, you're welcome, Stephanie. I hope that was okay for you. I hope that was okay for you. See, the big thing we've already talked about, the eclipse is going between your 1st and 7th house, right? This is big upheavals in your relationships. And we know that you have, had some difficult things pop up in relationships since that April solar eclipse. And now the next bit is going to be all about you, your health, right? And how you experience yourself. Unfortunately, it's an existential crisis. Who am I? What does this mean? Why am I going through all this? right? And it's a necessary phase because it presents you with a different vision, you know, different ideas about yourself that maybe you forgot about or took for granted or suppressed, you know. But then Saturn going through your sixth house, like we said, health issues and all that. But you've also had a lot of opposition, you know, because the sixth house is enemies. And you've had a lot of conflict and opposition, haven't you? So very characteristic of Saturn going through the sixth house. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer. Now you're having your Venus return right now. So you notice how, on the one hand, it's like exile. There's a sense of exile. Yes? Like you've been taken out of your home situation and pushed into a new one. But it's Venus. So you notice how Venus, there's some good parts to it, right? Like you had someone and you had a resource to help you through that. And at this time, with Jupiter going through your ninth house, you're learning about new spiritual values, new ways of thinking and looking at things. You're learning a lot more about astrology, right? You're being faced with new beliefs, new politics, right? And I know that you've been changing a lot over this cycle, right? This started in May. And you've already been going through lots of significant changes. Now Mars is going through your ninth house too, which gets you in arguments with people. And Mars is about to go into your 10th house, which is arguments with bosses and authority figures. So this could represent having to quit a job and look for a new one. Unfortunately, because that's, you know, without being too revealing of your situation, I mean, that's a pretty common occurrence with you. It's a pretty frequent thing. You know, now Mercury is going to be going retrograde back into your 11th house of alliances and friendships. So it's building back up your network of support. You see, there are people and friends you haven't talked to in a while, and you need to reestablish those relationships. Vesna, where were you in the list? Where were you in the list, Vesna? Can you put your, I have to go sequentially, so I'm going to see, because we had Vesna, we had Jennifer, we had Vesna, and we had Jennifer. Anyone else? Vesna and Jennifer. Please, and Vesna, would you put your birth information back in there? Thank you. Put your birth information back in there. Amber, you know how good I am already. You know? You know how good I am, so yeah. I want both. And please, if you wanted a reading and I didn't get to you, please chime in. Please chime in. Please chime in. We have to get Bexy at some point. We have to get Bexy at some point. So anyway, rebuilding your alliances and your supportive networks. Friends that you haven't talked to in a while. You need people who support you, because like you can't do this on your own as much as you want to. And you're really about to collapse, aren't you? So you see, this is very important stuff. This is very important stuff. And with Venus going through your 12th house, it's about mental healing, not just the exile. Processing trauma, which you're dealing a lot with, you know. So anyway, I guess we could look at your solar return. Yeah. Venus, Mars. Yes, me. Amber. Ambi. So there's the solar return, still Libra rising. Still Libra rising. The moon in Libra in the first house. Right? So once again, learning to build confidence again is going to be very important. And you see, you're a Libra rising, so this is going to be already the houses things are in, you see. So, yeah, gosh, your solar return actually happened yesterday. So this is already in the thick of it. So building confidence is going to be a very important thing indicated by this, but also focusing on your health. The fact that it's a Libra moon is also indicative of building up backup relationships, isn't it? Of building bridges with people, of being diplomatic once again. No, what's that song? Know when to hold 'em and know when to fold 'em, right? And then the Mars Jupiter thing you're going to have in your ninth house, right? And that's for this upcoming year until your next birthday. So you see, the focus really is on what you believe in many ways. But the alternate side of that is getting very, very defensive and worked up about what you believe. It's having conflicts with other people about what you believe. It's also cutting ourselves off from old beliefs that don't serve us anymore. And look, all this stuff hanging out in your 12th house also. Once again, the need for processing these traumas and these, sense of exile, sense of being alone, sense of being rejected, which you've been going through, right? And I've told you in the past, Venus going through the 12th house is all about mental healing. Learn to have some good cries, because that's how we process things, by allowing ourselves to feel them, you see. Now, Mars in September is going to go into your 10th house, as we talked about. So you really need to watch out for that. We'll look for this in a bi-wheel quickly. Bi-wheel. Amber. Where's this thing? Is that it? Yeah, this is it. This is it. Okay, thank you, Vesna. We'll get to you and Jennifer next. Anyone else chime in? Oh, and then Bexy. We have to get to Bexy. Bexy, let me get to these other two and then I'll get to you. I'll get to these other two and then I'll get to you. Look, see Mercury right on top of your Venus there. Once again, indicative of healing. And Mercury's retrograde. Mercury rules your ninth house of beliefs as well as your 12th house, right? In the same house. Excuse me. This is further indication of needing to process like big things you've been carrying around with yourself. Especially when Mercury's retrograde. It's about going inside and dredging all that shit up. And Venus rules what? Your 8th house, right? Where we keep our trauma shoved down. So you see how there's a lot of things coming up from your past, right? And some of those things will be abuse. It will, and it won't be comfortable. But this is all for your benefit, you see? It's all for your growth. So ultimately, because Venus is involved, you'll see these things yield some sort of, I want to say return, but it's not a material thing necessarily. Some sort of growth, some sort of, I guess growth is the better term. Development, right? Relief. Relief is a good term. Some sort of relief of that suffering nature, you see? Some sort of relief. And the South Node is conjunct your ascendant, right? So once again, resolving things from your past. The moon in the first house, we already talked about that confidence thing. And then you've got Pluto exactly opposite your Mercury. That's saying things that can be very difficult to say. It can also be your own abusive speech, or taking out anger or power on people through your speech, right? It could be revenge. It could be being infatuated with the sense of revenge. It's another thing to be aware of, you see? So anyway, what else? Yes, cat, I know. This fucking cat, yo. I love you too. Bexy took pictures of my cats last night when I was in the bathroom and sent them to me today. And I'm like, these goofy motherfuckers. It's like they like her more than me. You know? So anyway, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff here, but there's a lot of difficult stuff too, as we talked about. You know, it's a lot of difficult stuff as we talked about. But you see, the highlight here is having to deal with A, with your trauma coming up to the surface, B, building confidence, and C, transformations in what you believe. So that's sort of the theme coming up here. You know, and the 12th house, also exile. So learning to appreciate, you know, your exile or your new circumstances, which I think this is a great, this is great progress for you. So let's look at Vesna and then Jennifer and then Bexy. They just like to stare at me like a couple of weirdos. They are weird as fuck. They're super weird. Like Castor right now wants me to bring him up on my lap. But he's so weird about it. He acts like I'm the fucking bouncer at Studio 54 or at some nightclub. You know what I mean? Like, yo, just come on in. You don't need to check in with me. Okay, we're going to do Vesna really quick, and then we're going to do... and then we're going to do Stephanie and then Bex... Or, sorry, Jennifer and then Bexy. Jennifer and then Bexy. 058 Belgrade. Oh my gosh, Belgrade, Serbia. You poor baby, you've been through a lot. Belgrade, 1985. So if you were still there in the 90s, oh my god, baby, I'm so sorry. God, the things that the United States did to Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia. Oh, come here. Oh. Anyway. So, we have Vesna. Let's look at this really quick. Let me... Going between windows. Like, I gotta get more used to that. Hi, cat. There we go. So Vesna's a Gemini rising, which puts Jupiter and Mars in your first house. Right? This is going to be fun, 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 fun. And you recently had a birthday. You recently had a birthday. So we'll look at your solar return really quickly because that's what we've been doing. But you see, you're probably very attractive with Venus so closely conjunct your ascendant. 11 degrees and 11 degrees. It's mere minutes away. In fact, your ascendant is 11:59. It's interesting. You're basically a new moon, baby. The new moon was more or less on the day that you were born, right? Yeah. 10, 12 hours, something like that. You have Sun conjunct Mars like me. We have terrible tempers, but since your Mars is unhappy in Cancer, you probably let stuff build up, and then you explode. You know, we let things sort of like build up. You know, you might be uncomfortable getting angry, or you might be uncomfortable with conflict and stuff in general. Silly cat. Silly cat. But you would have a temper, or you'd be competitive. We see competitive people who are athletic, good with sports or exercise or something. I have it too. And we see people who tend to be more aggressive and assertive. You know, Mercury rules your first house and is in Leo. So once again, sort of an indication of being assertive. On the one hand, though, Chiron is also there, which indicates a need to learn confidence, because sometimes that can indicate people pleasing. And at the worst, sometimes codependence. I wonder if you have chronic health issues with Saturn in the 6th house. Or sometimes we grow up with a sense of duty as children. You know, we are constantly sort of submissive. And everything is about stuff that we have to do, obligation, and, you know. Jupiter in the 9th house conjunct the midheaven Like, these are typically very spiritual people. I have a good friend with this, and she's always like very mystical and, believes in things. Whereas I'm Saturn in the ninth house and I don't believe in a goddamn thing, you know? But Venus conjunct the ascendant is very attractive, quite frequently, and very welcoming. It can be a little stuck up sometimes. Sometimes I think of Venus in the first house as Marsha Brady, Marsha. Or Cher from Clueless. It's also kind of a Leo thing. But I think more of it is the first house Venus. See, and then the cat runs off. But building confidence is a big way that you get success in life, right? The moon, all this stuff in the second house. Money can be very difficult on the one hand, but then you do get luck with it. You get help and luck with money, it looks like. Let's get to your that cat is so cute, OMG. Yeah, I've got 2 cats. They're both brothers. They're both brothers. One of them is sleeping on my clean clothes. As soon as I get off here, I have to change the laundry over and run a couple errands. What's tomorrow? Monday. Oh, Bexy's coming over tomorrow. Amber says, oh, Bexy, she'll always have time for you. Man, Amber, what do you... It's none of your fucking business. Sorry. I was gonna do solar return. Solar return. Sorry. We were up late last night. Bexy kept me up till 1 in the morning. In a good way. I know we were both a little tired. When luck with money? I'd have to look at other timing stuff, sweetheart. I'd have to look at other timing stuff in order to determine that. So, Venus in the second house sort of indicates that, luck with money a little bit. Jupiter going to the 12th house, we've already talked about that. Having to face difficult things and heal from them. Casey says, I'm making you yawn too. I'm sorry. I was up late. There could be schisms or conflicts with friends with Mars conjunct Uranus. Unexpected fights with friends. Deconstruction and reconstruction of what you believe. Moon in Scorpio is very difficult, but being in the 5th house is fun. It puts the emphasis on your kids if you have them, or in pleasure, learning to have fun again, or sex. Sex is my favorite hobby. My favorite hobby. My number 1 hobby. So let's look at the bi-wheel. View bi-wheel. Let's see. Is it this one? Oh yeah, it's this one. Let's bring this back up here. There we go. Yes, it's all there. It's all there. So look, Jupiter's right on your ascendant. Oh my fucking God. Is this for real? Yeah. This is for real. Oh my God, Jupiter right on your ascendant. This is so auspicious for you. I mean, this year could be the year where you start seeing a lot of progress. It's expansion. The moon rules your 2nd house, though, and the moon really isn't happy in Scorpio, So, another indication of having to save, right? But the moon is like right on your Saturn. So it could indicate also healing and having to do a lot of, physical healing, right? Taking care of some chronic health issues or things that have been plaguing you or holding you back for a little bit. Saturn's going through your 10th house, which once again, that feels quite difficult because we feel like we're not making any progress. We're hitting a glass ceiling. We kept being told no. If we're applying for jobs, we don't get the job we want. But what it does do is open up new opportunities and possibilities, which you could see starting in January, leading up till June of next year. But especially after January. Okay. Or especially after June, but possibly between January and June also. There's a turning away from what you thought your life direction was before, and you're being sort of ushered into a new direction. Now with Mars and Uranus in your 12th house, that does indicate exile, right? Whether that's moving away or moving out of a current situation, right? Being kicked out, having to leave an abusive situation. I don't know. It could also indicate facing self-destructive behavior. During that time, you don't want to be like, you don't want to have a fuck it mentality. Like, oh, I can just drink as much as I want, or I can do this, or I can do that, right? It's not going to be good for you. But if you have had self-destructive patterns in the past, they probably could rear their ugly heads, But this year's pretty cool. I mean, this is pretty dope with Jupiter on your ascendant. You see, there's this big expansion mentally, perhaps physically. You don't want to overeat because you may gain a little bit of weight, but it's because of the optimism. When Saturn's in the first house, we lose weight because we're depressed, Meanwhile, when Jupiter's in the first house, we gain weight because we tend to be happy. There's a lot of optimism going through here, you see? And look, the North Node is in your 11th house of optimism. So there's a lot of wonderful stuff going on. There really is. It's just that there's the difficulties that are pointed to as well. Like, for example, Mars, and the Moon trine, which indicates passion. Yeah. It indicates the drive to push through things. It also indicates emotional volatility, right? It's easy to fall to pieces at the drop of a dime, or sometimes erupt. Like, I probably have intermittent eruption disorder, and I freak out and I get super mad and explosive. And then an hour later, it's like, gosh, why was I so mad? That was stupid, and I have remorse for it. That's very similar to the Mars and Cancer remorse, you see? So there's a lot of auspicious stuff here, but there's some difficulties to work through. But Jupiter on your ascendant and on Venus, like, oh my God, this is good luck. So, I mean, hopefully there's some monetary recompense that comes out of it. But money could also be difficult here because the Moon is what's called in fall in Scorpio and ruling your 2nd house. So I'd be a little concerned. Or rather, I'd be judicious about conserving my resources. Does that make sense? Conserve your resources. So anyway. Jennifer and Bexy. Jennifer, are you still here, baby? Jennifer, are you still here? Jennifer, are you still here? Because I'm getting to you, baby. I'm getting to you. Oops. New natal chart. Jennifer. Oh, I put Jennifer. Jennifer. There's no T in Jennifer. Jennifer. Oh, look, we have another Gemini. 6/19/96. You've been so patient, Jennifer. Thank you for bearing with us. Hopefully you're still here. I haven't looked at the chat down there because I'm looking at your information. Clear more. Look at that. Jennifer Casey. Casey Jennifer. Sorry. It's goofy. That's goofy. What's wrong with you, Saturn girl? Why are you so goofy? You're welcome. And Jennifer, here we are at your stuff. So you're Virgo rising, ruled by Mercury in the 10th house in Gemini. Really, that's very auspicious. I hope you've had a modicum of career success, right? Well, you're quite young. You're 13 years younger than me. So I'm 41. 31 minus 4 is 28. You're in your Saturn return, yeah? Where's Saturn? No. You're almost in your Saturn return. People call you, but they probably don't call you Casey Jennifer. Like, Jennifer isn't a traditional last name. But see, you're about to start having your Saturn return next summer, right? So this is really wild for you. When you have an 8th house Saturn, like Amber also does, the life motif is about loss, unfortunately. That sounds difficult, but you see, it's not all bad. It's about letting go, but we tend to learn to let go through loss. It's likely that you experienced death early on in your life before your Saturn return. Well, you're about to have your Saturn return. So usually we encounter a significant death in our lives before our Saturn. Oh my God, this cat got hair all over my tank top. Oh my God, I look like I rolled in cat hair. I look like the inside of a vacuum. Jesus Christ. People would think I'm a bear with all this hair. You know, you're going through a divorce right now. Well, you see, the thing about going through a divorce right now is Saturn is going through your 7th house of relationships, marriages, all in that. I'm divorced too. And I can tell you, it was one of the most difficult things I ever went through. And yet it brought me to the best time in my life. The most amazing thing happened when my daughter was born, right? And that was 2013. But then in 2021, when I came out, it was like my life began all over again. You see, so there's difficulty here, but going through divorce is going to free you up to be more of who you are. Oh, and you said, yes, my father passed away this year. I mean, see, I'm so sorry, baby. I'm really sorry, but that's typically what we see. It's very typically what we see. So I'm so sorry, baby. But that's one of the lessons of Saturn in the 8th house. You know? And that's a lot in 1 year. Sorry for your loss, Jen. Yeah, it is a lot. Thank you, Bexy, for being kind. It is. And you know, our hearts go out to you. But there's a lot of wonderful stuff in this chart too. Like this 10th house is like, yo, your sun is angular, your Venus is angular, Mercury, Mars, it's all angular. So basically the houses that each of these planets rule indicate some modicum of success or activation, if you will. So for example, Venus is retrograde, unfortunately, but she rules the 9th house. And she rules the 2nd house, which to me indicates that your money's, because ruling the 2nd house and your North Node there, that indicates to me that your money situation gets pretty good, or at least a lot better, after your 2nd nodal return. So around age 38. I know that probably sounds far away because it's 10 years away. Something like 10 years away for you. But still, this is wonderful. A lot of people would be envious of this. Now, you probably get lucky, you know, with jobs or promotions or recognition. But you also have difficulty with that because you hate authority, I'm pretty sure. Now, Uranus is trine Mars. I have Mars in Gemini too. We fucking argue. No one can argue like us. We also, you know, we fuck. Like, we have high sex drives. And you also have a sharp tongue with Mercury conjunct Mars. You may be a very smooth talker. You could probably talk your way out of a paper bag or out of a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, more like it. But you also probably yell. You get forceful with how you speak. You might be very persuasive or aggressive with how you speak. You may be a good singer or like to sing and have a good speaking voice also. But the good things of Venus would be later in life, you see. So money stuff would be slower coming. You might find your spiritual way, or you might find what you believe, right? Later in life as well, or as you approach your late 30s. It could also indicate the resolution of a legal matter, around that time. So, and then having the sun in the 10th house is also very auspicious, you see. And the sun rules your 12th house. So I don't know if you have anything to do with, other people's pain, perhaps, like working in some sort of industry or whatever, or volunteering, with the homeless or the downtrodden or drug addicts or prisons. I don't know if you have anything to do with prisons or therapy or anything like that. But you have to be careful of your own tendency for drugs and alcohol or addiction, right? You have to be aware of your own depression, mental health stuff, or your tendency towards substances, escape, things like that. It would be important to recognize those things, right? See, Jupiter is not very happy in Capricorn, ruling your 11th house. So you may have a little social awkwardness or feel shy, or it may be hard just getting close to other people and friends and stuff. But you see how it's trine your ascendant, which is very lucky. It's very lucky, So friendships would get better as you got older, because Jupiter's also retrograde, There's some aggressive stuff here, but it's all wonderful. And you may be learning about loss for the first, we'll say half of life, but it's, you're going to live longer than that. I mean, I'm going to tell you that. I don't really know, because we haven't done length of life technique or anything like that, which even still in modern times is fallible, right? And you may have had difficulty with money growing up too. But you see, all that stuff starts to change as you get older, right? You start having more success with money. You start being able to be better with money, you see? So, it's about learning to build your own empire. You probably felt like you never had your own stuff, like everyone held everything over your head, right? And now it's about building your own little empire. Maybe you start a small business. I don't know. That's what I ended up doing. And if you told me 10 years ago that I was going to start a small business, I would have told you you're stupid. I'm working at the university. I'm going to be, an assistant director, all that sort of stuff. I was aspiring at climbing the ladder, in my old company. And it was ultimately making me miserable. So you may see stuff like that. Now, I'm pretty sure you might have children, right? But there'd be difficulties with that. I don't want to be mean, but when I see the ruler of the 5th house, which is Saturn, unhappy in the 8th house, I wonder if you're going to have a miscarriage, or if you've had a miscarriage, or if there's fertility issues, or maybe you just don't want children. I don't know. But it looks like children are a possibility, but only later and only after a lot of difficulty, probably. So I'd expect there to be a miscarriage at some point. I'm sorry if that's disturbing information. I'm sorry. But I have to be honest. So there's difficulty with having children. You see, I know Jupiter's there, which sort of says, yeah, you're going to have some kids, but it's an unhappy Jupiter and it's retrograde, which indicates things happening later, There are 2 who are on the spectrum. You also lost your first pregnancy. Yeah, so you see I was right about that. And I don't mean to be blunt about it. So, I mean, it's not that much later in life, but, Jupiter in the 5th house, an abundance of children, Yeah, we understand what it's like. See, my dad passed away too when I was 20. He took his own life. He was a Vietnam veteran. And he'd gone through at least 3 abusive relationships, including with my mother, And so, in a way, I was surprised, but not surprised. He always said that suicide was for pussies, But there, he went and did it. So it's very difficult stuff. I'm so sorry for your loss, baby. And I'm so sorry for you too, JC. I'm so sorry for your loss. It's very difficult losing a parent early on, right? Because it rips away that sense of support. You know? It rips away that sense of like, gosh, you know, I have somewhat of a safety net. Now, not all of us have any good experience of our parents, but I always felt like my dad would always rescue me if I needed it. And then all of a sudden he wasn't there. And when I was about 10 years old, he told me, he's like, Frankie, when I die, you're going to... Now, I was raised as a little boy, of course. So my dad said to me, Frankie, when I die, you're going to be a man, or you're going to have to be a man. I'm a woman, of course, a trans woman. But you see, when my dad died, suddenly I had this complex about having to grow up. And that's not necessarily true. Because it takes the pleasure out of life and the mystery out of life. You have to be who you are and where you're at, regardless of who the fuck your parents were. You know, we can honor them and honor our memories. But it also, there's another side to this where we move on into our own sense of strength and independence, and we develop as potentially strong conscious beings, right? Strength comes from confidence. Confidence comes from doing things, from accomplishment, and from enduring pain. We get confidence from pain and suffering if you use it appropriately, right? Otherwise, pain and suffering can turn into resentment. Like, look at a Hitler type, you know? I'm sure he was full of resentment. Meanwhile, look at someone like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose pain and suffering made him aware and compassionate towards the working class, and he did amazing things, you see? So you see, there's different ways to approach our pain and suffering. It just depends on the angle that we're taking, our relationship to ourselves, right? It reflects our capacity for compassion, yeah? Which is being able to relate to the suffering of others and wanting to help it. So that's the definition of compassion. Anyway, I guess we'll really quickly look at our solar return. And we'll just go right to the... Jesus, I've almost gone 3 hours. You see, I could speak like all fucking day. Like, I could go on like this, even, but I need to eat. I eventually just want to do live streams. Doing videos is so tedious, like recording, and I'm way better live. Like, I'm way more natural and shit. It sounds so contrived when I'm doing my video essays, you know? It sounds so contrived. Yeah, you know, and I'm not trying to be preachy, Jennifer. I'm sorry. That it's just my experience. And sometimes my experience is useful and sometimes it's not, but I just wanted to interject that there because I can relate to what you've been saying. Okay. Now let's... Properties. And then just turn it back on. So we went right to the bi-wheel because, I mean, quite honestly, we're pressed for time. And this is the most important part of it. And look, Jupiter's in your 10th house, right on your Mars. So Jupiter's tempering that Mars, right? And remember, Mars has the tendency to really hate authority here, especially when it's trine Uranus. And have conflicts with authority. You know, maybe having conflicts with employment or jobs, getting fired, getting cut off from all that. Meanwhile, Jupiter's bringing in this influence that smooths and harmonizes all that out, right? This is when new opportunities emerge. It's when you have opportunities for new jobs, career changes, or life direction changes, right? This is very auspicious for you, you know? This is very auspicious for you. This is lovely. Is Jupiter aspecting anything else here? If Venus was in Cancer when you had your solar return, right, in your 11th house, which indicates getting help from supporters, right? Reconnecting with friends or people that you maybe haven't spoken with in a while, you know? Which is quite interesting. Oh, and the eclipse coming up in October is going to be in your 2nd house of your money stuff. So if you are starting a small business or changing careers or looking to make more money, after October 2nd, between October and I think April of next year is going to be very auspicious timing for you. You see? Meanwhile, after April of this year, you may have had a financial loss, or you may have had a big debt that came up, or death that, may have come up. But yeah, there's some good financial stuff, And we're about to have a lunar eclipse on September 2nd. I have to do a video really fucking soon about the eclipse. And look, Saturn is on your descendant. So on the one hand, that could mean the deepening of a marriage or commitment. On the other hand, it could mean since March of last year, you've been involved in what? Divorce. So that sounds more likely because you've already told me that. But also Saturn being opposite your ascendant, makes this part of a transformation of your identity. Like this is something. See, when we go through these big relationships shifts, right? When we go through big endings and beginnings in relationships, it affects how we experience ourselves. And how we experience ourselves affects how we relate to other people, doesn't it? So the interesting thing about this is on the one hand, there's this divorce or relationship strain, while on the other, because that full moon, that eclipse, the lunar eclipse is going to be in your 1st house, there's this big change in how you experience yourself. There's this ending to an existential crisis. You could come out of this with a greater sense of independence, you see, with a greater sense of confidence. And like I said, pain and suffering make us confident oftentimes, Yes, you're losing a bunch of weight. Wonderful, you see? Wonderful. And this could also indicate that too, this lunar eclipse. Bringing an end to a physical situation as well. Oftentimes. So this is really cool stuff. There's a lot of good stuff going on, Excuse me, a lot of good stuff going on. A lot of good stuff going on. One. Life goes on and on and on and on. See, you have natal Pluto opposite natal Mars, and that life just feels difficult. It feels like you have to fight hard for everything. I mean, it's good sort of like for going after what you want, like having the drive to persevere and press through, right? But life fights you every which way, Now, Mars going through your 9th house. There's a split up with your beliefs. Watch out. There's going to be an aggression around your beliefs. You see? Aggression around your beliefs. There might be a little fanaticism, whatever. It indicates oftentimes arguing, political zealotry. Maybe you get volunteering on a campaign and you get very passionate about a political movement or a campaign or something. I don't know. So, but that's all wonderful stuff. Let's look at Bexy. Bexy. Life goes on and 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 on. Bexy. Bexy goes on and on and on. Life goes on and on and on. Okay, Bexy. So we've got... Yes. Life goes on and on and on and on and on and on. 7:30 p.m. And I've got hair all over me. Okay. Okay. So here is Bexy. Here's Bexy, Gemini rising, ruled by Mercury. Mercury in the sixth house. I mean, that oftentimes indicates health issues when we have our first house ruler in the sixth house. It also indicates being submissive, having a submissive personality. Or it can indicate having to fight uphill a lot, right? It indicates having to face struggles that are a lot bigger than yourself. But you do them because it's the right thing to do. Like I often think of Muhammad Ali, right? Muhammad Ali, the famous boxer. What did he do? During the Vietnam War, he burned his draft card, right? Now, he went to jail for it, and he knew he wasn't going to defeat the United States government or stop the Vietnam War, but he knew it was the right thing to do. And he knew it was not a winnable fight, but that it signaled, it sent a message, you see. But we often think of difficulties with health or chronic health issues, right? Sometimes neurodivergence with Mercury in the sixth house and in Scorpio. Sometimes there can be a little paranoia or a tendency to sort of stalk people, taking a peek at what they're up to, you know? But then Mercury conjunct Pluto too. I won't want chronic health issues, but they're common in my family. Well, you'd know by now. Believe me, you'd know by now if you had any. So, you'd know by now. So it might not be an issue. It might not be an issue. But you do see stuff like that. And given that it's Mercury in Scorpio, we do see neurodivergence oftentimes, you know? We do see neurodivergence. And Mars is trine, Mars is trine Mercury. So there's all this stuff about you having a very sort of probing and even intense kind of mind. You may be a very good arguer, or you may be very good at forceful speech, trying to, what's the word? Persuade people with Pluto conjunct Mercury. Persuasive, perhaps? Persuasive. But submissive personality. You just have to watch out for people taking advantage, of course. And the North Node is in the seventh house, which indicates that as you get older, life tends to be more about harmonizing relationships. Whereas the first part of life is very difficult with relationships because it's about cultivating confidence. And when you have a sense of fear around relationships or a difficulty sort of establishing your own independent, confident self, then we get into situations where we feel stuck, and Venus in the seventh house. Now it's in Sagittarius, so it loves to fuck, right? It's very sexual. And it needs different experiences, right? It needs to try different things. Otherwise it gets it can get bored or despondent or just feel unfulfilled. But when it's in the seventh house, there's also a need there's a simpiness, right? A desire to please a partner, which can be very good and constructive, except when it's codependent. When we're too afraid, right, to speak up and be ourselves, then we let people treat us like shit. And hopefully you never ever let me do that to you. And hopefully I never ever let myself do that to you, because, you don't deserve it. But you've also been through enough in your life where you're aware, of building strength and building independence. And it's through that strength and independence that allows us to approach relationships in a constructive way, in a healthy way, and a fulfilling way. And look, you have Saturn in the ninth house like I do, right? Saturn in the ninth house often indicates, right, having very religious upbringing or being in a religious family or a religious school. And we turn away from that religion early on, especially before our Saturn return, before age 29, 30. And oftentimes we get attracted to religions our parents don't belong to. But we also get very skeptical. And like I said, we don't take other people's words for things. We want to find out for ourselves. I mean, it could make us atheists, but then we go on a quest for meaning for the rest of our lives. Hello from Montenegro. Hello, my sweetheart. We had Serbia in the house. We have Montenegro in the house. We oftentimes have Croatia in the house. You know, we oftentimes have Romania and Bulgaria. So we've got lots of Eastern Europe and the Balkans, you know. We've got wonderful friends and fans and supporters there. Oh, the other thing about neurodivergence is Chiron in the third house, right? That oftentimes brings what we used to call learning disabilities, you know, and speech impediments and difficulty speaking up, a sense of intellectual inferiority and all that. But, you know, instead of learning disabilities, we know that a lot of it's neurodivergence. So autism, ADHD, ADHD, you know. A lot of us struggle with these things too, you know. See, there's a lot of very intense stuff in here. But also at the same time, there's indications of needing to build confidence. See, when you have Jupiter and the Sun in the 5th house too, that makes you very, very sexual. Very, very sexual. Which is very fun. Very fun. Moon in Virgo, also submissive. You know, Moon in the 4th house, may be very interested in history. You know, tied a little bit to your genealogy, your ancestry, or maybe a spiritual tradition of your ancestors. I don't know. You know, getting in touch with your ancestors. So anyway, let's look at your solar return really quick. So, Mercury would also represent your dad, being that it was in the 4th, or that it rules your 4th house. Excuse me. And is in the 6th. Oftentimes that means dad is either an enemy or works in the medical profession somehow, or you know, workaholic, never around, you know, self-destructive, that kind of stuff. Anyway, and then the moon being in Virgo, mom is meek and submissive and codependent and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, we should look at your... Oh, 7th house ruler is Jupiter in the 5th house. So you need a partner like me, which you now have. A very sexual partner. A very childlike and youthful partner. A partner who loves kids, right? 5th house stuff. A partner who loves to have fun, right? More 5th house stuff. And a partner who knows how to fuck and who loves to fuck, right? So, you know, it's a match made in heaven, isn't it, sweetheart? Very wonderful. Dad was cuckoo bananas, which is also 6th house stuff. You know, also 6th house stuff. I wonder if you're good with animals, which you already know because you have animals, right? Mercury in the 6th house. Your 6th house ruler is also Mars in the 2nd house. Just watch out with that 2nd house Mars spending money, because there would be a natural tendency to spend money, you know. But there's also luck with money, you know. There's also luck with money. Now, solar return. Solar return. Solar return. What, we should just go to the bi-wheel. Pluto conjunct the solar return. I mean, it's such a wide conjunction, but still. I mean, this is a transformational year, you know. And Mars is opposite the ascendant on the descendant. Once again, this is sort of a big year, transformational, you know. Transformational year. Which means oftentimes we experience a crisis. See, Mars is in the 7th house on your solar return. So, After your birthday, there could be some sort of difficult split. I mean, Mars is going to be going through your... Well, we should look at your bi-wheel. Jupiter conjunct the moon. Again, wide, but still really auspicious. Still really auspicious. Indicating a sense of fullness, abundance, right? Feeling good, feeling optimistic, right? Feeling good, feeling optimistic, but also being welcoming and jovial for the most part, even though there's going to be some difficult stuff going on. Let's look at the bi-wheel. Okay, where's that other thing? Okay. I hate leaving dead air, but I have to switch fucking charts, you know? So you see, the Jupiter moon thing is going to be in your first house. And what does that indicate? It indicates a greater sense of independence and confidence, right? We've talked about Jupiter and the moon, right, being in the first house, not just in transit, but in the solar return, right? And this also creates a sense of abundance and optimism, right? Because Jupiter is influencing the emotional nature, right? And the body, right? So you could see improvements in your health. You could see improvements in how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your health. You could also start to feel more intelligent. You could see yourself more engaged, right? Because Jupiter rules your 10th house in a professional situation where you gain a bit more control. You take on a bit more leadership, yes? And look, Venus is on your descendant, yeah? Opposite your ascendant. This often indicates the deepening of a relationship, right? It could even be a new relationship. You could meet someone else, of course, too. But it indicates that relationships are emphasized coming up this next year, you know? Relationships are emphasized, whether it's a new person or, you know, a current relationship. There's harmony that comes out of this. Now, the eclipses are between your 5th and 11th house. So the eclipse coming up after October, you know, it could indicate some, I mean, the 5th house is children. It could be something along those lines. But it could also be finding pleasure in life again, having fun. You know, a year of more pleasurable activities, you see? And then Mars in your 2nd house. So once again, you got to be careful of the tendency to spend. And then Saturn going through your 10th house. So this usually indicates that opportunities feel like they're slipping through our fingers, as I mentioned earlier. It often indicates that we feel like we lose our direction in life. But the thing we don't realize is that, oh, Pollux is dreaming. He's over there dreaming and like, he's like suckling and like moving his tongue and shit. Oh, now he hears me. Yes, I was talking about you, furry doofus. So anyway, you see Saturn in the 10th house makes us feel like we're losing our life direction, but it's because that we need to be put on a new track. So you could see big changes in your career next year. You know, you could find new opportunities. Maybe it feels like you missed an opportunity last time, or that, you know, you were passed up or passed over, or I don't know. But it can be depressing and it can feel stagnant. But don't worry, things improve. You see? Things improve. Mars is also going through your 1st house right now, which can also indicate surgery or health issues or, you know, burns, cuts, scrapes, bruises, bites. You know? I mean, that could indicate me. You know? It could indicate me. But also we get way more assertive during this transit. Although on September 4th, Mars is going to go into your 2nd house, which once again, the money thing. So just keep track of your funds. Like, don't spend willy-nilly, of course. You know? Anyway, I mean, so this all starts in October. But the other thing about all of this you have to be aware of is what's happening now with Mercury. And Mercury is, retrograde now in your fourth house and needs to go and is about to go back into your third house, which indicates either an educational thing, right? That maybe you get a certificate or something that you've been training for, or an intellectual pursuit, a speaking or writing project that maybe didn't go well and you have to redo. It could indicate on-the-job training people, right? Training people who maybe did not get trained properly before, right? Or you may get a call from a sister, right? Or brother, a sibling that you haven't talked to in a long time. And now it could be a sibling, cousin, aunt, uncle, But typically it tends to be sisters because, well, no, I mean, it could be a brother too because Mercury's involved. But I imagine it would be a sister because the third house is siblings and all of that. But Mercury is neither female nor male. It's non-binary. They are non-binary, Mercury. Or you could say intersex, maybe even too. Right? Mercury straddles the sexes. Right? So there could be some very interesting stuff around that with Mercury retrograde. And Venus is going through your fourth house. So there's a need to sort of clean up your living space, right? Or there's a need to, maybe you reconnect with your parents on some level or your dad or something. Well, no, that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't work. But you see, Venus going through your fourth house could indicate needing to decorate your home space or make it conform more to your feeling of yourself, to feel beautiful on the inside and in your home space. Anyway, one more person put their shit up. I don't know. Should I do this or not? I really need to. I've gone 3 hours now. I was only supposed to do 2. So if I do Boban, I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart. Because I was not going to do this long. It's been 3 fucking hours. Now I'm getting hangry. I have to run fucking errands. I have shit to do. I can't just stay on this shit all fucking day, We have someone born at 0 dark 30. 0 dark 30. And this is going to be a quick one, I'm sorry, because I gotta go. I have to go. I've got shit to do. And I'm very hungry, which means I'm hangry. And I'm like, oh, my patience is running thin. Okay. There we go. Okay. So we have a Scorpio rising. All this stuff in the 12th house. Scorpio is ruled by Mars, of course. Mars is in the 4th house. Usually I see this kind of stuff and I think there may have been a difficult relationship with the father. Maybe dad was an alcoholic or an addict of some sort. Maybe mentally ill. Or maybe in prison. Or just not around. Just not around. Now, Saturn is very happy. So if there was any, reconciling with your dad or getting back into a relationship, it would happen, probably after age 30. Maybe you reconnected with your father. Your 12th house is ruled by Venus in the 3rd house. Now, I wonder if you had a sibling who was an addict, possibly. A sibling who was an addict. And then you would have to watch out for your own addictive tendencies, probably. Or self-indulgence, because Jupiter is square Venus. And I often see that in cases where people, go a little too far with drinking or eating or whatever. Right? There's a feeling of like, needing to relieve yourself through self-indulgence, which oftentimes takes the form of, food or pleasure or, substances or whatever. But then Jupiter also indicates, a need for healing and processing. Jupiter rules the second house, so money has probably been difficult or not been easy. Maybe you were stolen from, maybe someone stole money from you. And then the fifth house. So if you have children, I wonder if any of your children are depressed or ADHD or neurodivergent, or if any of your children had sort of, difficulties with some of these issues, you see. Because that could be a thing. And then you're probably interested in history. You're probably interested in the, your homeland or your home culture, your ancestors or something like that. There could also be generational wealth, or you could have gotten an inheritance. Your eighth house ruler is Mercury in the fourth house, which sometimes can be generational wealth. Again, the fourth house Mars usually indicates conflicts or fights with dad. And I bet you have a very aggressive speaking, voice or, manner. You're probably a big arguer, or you can be. But for romantic partners, you need the type of person you can connect with intellectually, someone who you can share ideas with. You're not going to be interested in people just because they're hot, You want someone who's intelligent, someone you can speak to. You see, that would be quite important. Now, Jupiter's going through your eighth house right now, which indicates, once again, it can be inheritance. It can be a little luck with money, someone presenting you with a gift. It can also be writing down a debt, paying off part of a debt, or being released from one. You see? Sometimes on a psychological level, we face traumas that we haven't dealt with before. And we allow ourselves to process by allowing ourselves to feel things. It's usually stuff that we didn't want to feel, that we found, exceedingly painful, right? And so when things come up, we're like, la, 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 I can't hear it, and that doesn't help us. Doesn't help us. When I see Chiron in the seventh house, I think of someone who doesn't trust other people. Because they've had other people let them down, you see. But the North Node there in the 10th house indicates that life, you're around my age, so you're in this time right now. Life becomes more and more about success and recognition and your ambition. It's about achievement. It's about doing things and achieving things, you see. So you won't be satisfied, or you're no longer satisfied with ideas about thinking about things or whatever. You need them to happen. What they call manifesting is just doing shit, you see? Excuse me. And look, your sun is square your ascendant. Right, you can look at your ascendant, especially Scorpio ascendant, as sort of representing the spiritual warrior. People who engage in a conflict with themselves in order to find themselves. Right, there's a struggle between what we perceive as the self and the not self. And remember, what we call the self, there's always more of it to find. Like I always say, be yourself. Just remember there's more of yourself to be. Right, this Scorpio rising is on a quest to delve into the darkness of the psyche to reveal more and more of what it really is. And so you can kind of see that solar nature, that Aquarius nature, which is very cold and aloof, right, as being an impediment to that, because you have to allow yourself to feel things, right? And you have to let go of your mistrust and your social awkwardness, perhaps, in order to, to find a greater sense of authenticity, right? And of being, like I said, being yourself. Just remember, there's more of yourself to be. And what you take as yourself now will totally change in a few years, right? So just remember that. Anyway, I gotta go. I love you all. Please like the stream and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all of your support and your donations. I love you very much. And please tell all your fucking friends. Bring them to my channel. Tell them to watch my shit. And also, I do the best readings in person. Like, I do the best read, well, over Zoom. But I do full readings. And go to my website, saturngirl.org, to check it out, please. Now, have a wonderful day, or whatever you're having. I have international audience, so people are experiencing all times of day.